passed down the glen one Easter morn to a city fair Odysee. There are lines of marching men, its squadrons pass me by. No pipes did hum, no battle drum did sound its loud tattoo. But the Angelus bell or the Liffey swell rang out in the foggy dew. Right proudly high over Dublin town, they flung out the flag of war. 'Twas better to die neath an Irish sky than at Suvla or Sudelbor. And from the plains of the Royal Mead, strong men came hurrying through, while Britannia's sons with their great big guns sailed into the foggy dew. Oh, the night fell black and the rifles cracked, made perfidious Albion reel. Mid the laden rain, 7 tongues of flame did shine o'er the lines of steel. By each shining blade a prayer was said, that to Ireland the songs be true. When the morning broke, still the war flag shook out its fold in the foggy dew. 'Twas England bade our wild geese go, that small nations might be free. But their lonely graves are by Suvla's waves on the fringe of the great North Sea. Oh, had they died by Pierce's side, or fought with Cobra, their names we would keep where the Fenians sleep, in the shroud of the foggy dew. Oh, the bravest bell and the requiem bell ring mournfully and clear, for those who died at Eastertide in the springtime of the year. Oh, while the world did gaze with deep amaze at those fearless men but few, who bore their fight that the freedom's light might shine through the foggy dew. Back through the glen I rode again, my heart with grief was sore, for I parted with those gallant men whom I'll never see no more. But to and fro in my dreams I go, and I kneel and I pray for you, for slavery fled. Oh, glorious day, when you fell in the foggy dew.
Good evening and welcome to all our white brothers and sisters joining us from wherever you find yourself in the world tonight. We look forward to great conversation with Mr. Justin Barrett joining us from the Irish Nationalist Party and Clann Éireann. Now, I don't believe that Justin needs any introduction, but for the Afrikaner people listening or to the people abroad, he's a well-accomplished politician. He's got very keen insights into the political landscape, both locally in Ireland as well as internationally, I do believe. And I say this not to overly compliment the man, but I do believe that if there is any man that can save Ireland, it is Justin, and the people of Ireland need to get behind him, both the Irish people that find themselves in Ireland, as well as the Irish diaspora. And with that, Mr. Barrett, welcome to the third episode of The Recap.
Good evening, Johannes. Good evening. I'm very glad to be here. I am a little bit flattered by the introduction, and hopefully, at least empirically, I can live up to it within the context of the broadcast, if not in the broader sense of the word. So thank you very much for having me on.
Absolutely. Well, there was this great poet in Afrikaans, Impie van Wyk Louw. He once said that, it's where I sort of get my line of thinking that we should never be outcome-based, but we should be principle-based. And he said, it's not necessarily a tragedy that a generation should fail in their rebellion, but it is a tragedy when an entire generation would go past without rebelling. So, the success of all of our endeavors, that is yet to be seen. But I do believe the most important thing, and the people that truly win, are the people that try to ignite the national spirit, like yourself, and that fight for the principles of what it means to be a people and nationalism. So with that, Mr. Barrett, could you please introduce yourself to the Afrikaner audience and tell us, how did you get involved in politics? What would you say was some of the defining moments that moved you to get active in politics?
Right. Myself personally, I don't believe that I ever had a time when I wasn't political. I can't remember a time when I wasn't political. I can't remember one of my earliest childhood memories is, and it sounds like an unbelievable story now, but I'll swear to you that it's true. I've told Irish people this many times, is after the Pinochet coup in Chile against the communist government there, the Irish government took in as refugees and based them mostly around the Shannon region. People who had fled the Pinochet regime, if you like, including one former junior minister of the Allende regime. Now, I would have been about 5 years of age at the time, and I had a terrible habit of, as you might imagine, when people. It's innate to my personality, and was innate to me then, is to try and hold center floor in any given situation. And I had no social control at all when I was 5. So I was talking and talking and talking and talking and talking. And of course, it was all politics. I don't know exactly what I said, but it was all politics. And the junior minister in Allende's regime, I only found this afterwards, that he was such a man. The junior minister in the Allende regime said, you'll make a great socialist TD one day. That's a member of the Irish Parliament, TD Teachta Dáil. You'll make a great socialist MP, TD one day. And I turned around and, my God, did I get trouble when I got home. But anyway, I just said straight into his face, I said, I'm no bloody socialist and I never will be. But I didn't deny the member of parliament part. I didn't deny the Teachta Dáil part. But I was not having it that I was a socialist. Now, I read that very much in Marxist, Leninist terms. So here I am, an avowed national socialist. So in a weird, strange way, he was correct. But that's my earliest political memory, and it's probably my earliest memory, full stop.
Well, that's a wonderful story, Mr. Barrett. I mean, I think it would be fair to say then that you were born for it. You know?
Yeah, literally. So, I couldn't imagine I tell you, I went through a process. At first, I can remember being very young, wanting to be a member of An Garda Síochána, which was the Irish police force. Now, thankfully, I gave up on that ambition because I never grew to the height that was the requirement for membership of An Garda Síochána. But it was when I realised that I went through two things in my life. Number one was realising that the police did not make the law. And since they did not make the laws, I went, well, what's the point in being one then? And that's how I concluded it. And then, as an adult, being involved in politics, in confrontation with An Garda Síochána on numerous occasions, not especially violent heretofore, but one doesn't know. But up till now, I realized that actually the police do make up the laws a lot of the time, and you're on the spot and you're actually talking straight into the face of the police officer and you're saying, this is not legal to arrest me for this action, only to be told that I can arrest you for whatever I damn well like.
That's very interesting. It's a little story that sort of bridges the gap between Ireland and South Africa, because what you say is so true with the police being the ones that not only enforce the law, but oftentimes, make it up as they go. So there was an incident in my town, or a town where I live nearby, where a couple of local Afrikaners that were doing security, in the neighborhood watch, caught some blacks stealing sheep. And they reported these blacks to the police. And when they went to the police station to lay the charges against the blacks that stole the sheep, it turned out that those blacks were connected with the ANC, and those farmers, those Afrikaners that laid the charges, were arrested there and then on the spot, lost all their businesses, had to pay bribing money to the blacks that stole. So, yeah, I mean, I believe that people imitate, I say that in a very loose term of the meaning people, but we do imitate our leaders. And right now, the tribe, or the international finance capital, is in control of the upper echelons of government all throughout the West, all throughout the white world. So it is often that because these people are so corrupt in their being, it is imitated by everybody below them in the social hierarchy. But if you won't mind, or don't mind, for the Afrikaner people especially, because it's hard for our people here. People are downtrodden. They're very cynical about the future, and a lot of them oftentimes, in a moment of weakness, consider leaving South Africa for greener pastures. And I mean, Ireland's got a lot of green pastures. I know a couple of people that live in Ireland themselves. I myself even considered, as a young man, working there for a brief moment. But could you give us a real and realistic, actual perspective into the political landscape of Ireland? Because I do believe that there's a lot of parallels between Ireland and South Africa in the political sense, but also on the field demographically. Would you care to tell people what it's like living in Ireland today as a white man?
Well, right. There are a number of similarities, and of course there are a number of differences. The similarity is that we have a growing immigrant population, and it's not ethnically European. Of course, the overall heading questions that you're talking about always involve globalism. And if they involve globalism, they are on a global scale. So there is no point in really pretending that there is a significant difference from the central plan being organized by them on a global scale as it plays out in South Africa, or it plays out in the United States, or it plays out on continental Europe, or as it plays out on a small island of Ireland, other than they have their local agents on the ground who are there to read the local conditions and so forth. But they're only there to adapt the central plan to the ultimate outcome. And what we have had in Ireland in really just the last 30 years, and specifically within the last 15, is a huge influx of immigration. Now, we had a noticeable influx in the early 1990s, but that kind of slowed down again. And now we're in this kind of whirlwind situation where it is a question of something like 23% of the Irish population is now foreign born. Now, quite a good deal of that foreign born is European foreign born. So it's within the EU. But of course, that creates its own problems within a nationalist context. But the particular problem, and the one that we share with yourselves as fellow white people, as it were, and I don't mean that in the mimetic sense, we have had a large influx of non-whites for the first time. This is something that in my childhood, it would not have been something that I would have seen on a daily basis as people of any other color or any other recognizable description. And it would require somebody to open their mouths and talk to indicate that they were foreign in any way. And the likelihood was the accent that you would hear was either American or it was English, or possibly it was continental Europe. But even that was a rarity. But to see foreign faces in the street recognizable from the distance as clearly not of our people would not have occurred in my childhood. What would only have begun to occur in my teens would have been rare, and it would have been strong mid-adulthood before it became what one would call normal. Now it's what one would call abnormal. That is, there are so many and they are coming so quickly that it isn't even possible for those who are in favor of them coming in, and there are people who argue for that, those who are in favor of them coming in cannot keep up with the pace. And there are even voices on the pro-immigration side saying too many, not too many as such, but too many too quickly. And
just to interject there, so the idea then being that if they bring in too many too quickly, that might elicit this response, like you said, from the Irish nationalists, because like you said, you could not fathom it as a child, and then all of a sudden, if you see it so suddenly imposed on you, then it might elicit a reaction from the Irish people. But if I could ask you this, because I think it's very important to the conversation, as an Irish nationalist, what makes an Irishman? Can somebody from Egypt, an ethnic Egyptian, or an ethnic Nigerian, can he come to Ireland? I know this might strike you as a silly question, but
no, it doesn't, because it's asked all the time, and it's
exactly.
It's
Can they come to Ireland and assimilate to your culture? Is legal immigration from non-white countries something that you think we should support, or should we altogether deport even the legal immigrants in our countries?
Well, first of all, just it's interesting that you used Egypt as an example. Just being specifically on that ethnicity, Rudolf Hess was born in Egypt. So we're suggesting that the deputy Führer of the Third Reich was Egyptian, for by chance to be born in Cairo. Nobody at the time would have ever suggested that, and it would have been absurd and ridiculous to do so. Now that's to give you the ultimate error of or if you're born in a place, that's what you are.
Exactly.
This was a mere accident of birth in his case, and it's a mere accident of birth in general. Where does nationhood come from? Where does nationality come from? Nationality must come from the bloodline. If it doesn't come from the bloodline, then it doesn't have any meaning at all. If it's accident of birth, or it's accident of, or it's deliberation of importation, well, then it becomes genocide. It becomes ethnocide, or it can become ethnocide. And so the Irish people are distinct people, just as the Afrikaners are distinct people. And people now who would say, for example, the Afrikaners, well, they're just Dutch. There's a truth to that, but there's a falsehood within it. It's not fully understanding the nature of the Boer people and how they have developed since their ancestors left Europe many centuries ago. What makes an Irishman is in the blood. And because we have a history of emigration, that is leaving this country because we were under British rule, as the Afrikaner was, we were under British rule, and it was not a pleasant experience, to say the least. Although we were regarded as absolutely under the law, we were equal to our English or Scots or Welsh counterparts. But of course, nobody in the empire was equal to the English in practice. But we sent MPs to the Westminster Parliament, to the mother of all parliaments, under the guise of being Irish representatives, and yet the result was immigration, and the result was the famine of the 1840s, which was only called the Great Famine because there had been many others. And that was imposed by the economic conditions, which was imposed by free trade England, which was imposed by its world empire status. So we've gone abroad, we've gone everywhere, and everywhere we have gone there and remained Irish where we were.
Okay.
So we in Clann, for example, do not regard the Irish American, for example, or the Irish Canadian or the Irish Australian, or for that matter, although it'd be more rare, but the Irish South African.
Which you do find.
We would not regard the blood Irishman born in a different place to be any less Irish than somebody that was like born in the house beside me here. On the other hand, those born on this island in the last 20 to 30 years of foreign ethnic heritage have no intention of assimilating. Now, that, to be blunt about it, is about the only positive. They do not intend to integrate. They do not intend to assimilate. I think certain liberal forces and certain liberal political tendencies would like them to be assimilating. But of course, that's been tried. It's been tried in France. It's been tried in Britain. It's been tried in Germany. It's been tried elsewhere. The idea of assimilating non-European ethnics into a European culture. By the time they started arriving in Ireland, that idea that could even be done was already a dead idea. And
yes.
So what Irish liberals came up with was a new definition of Irishness.
Yeah.
That
Yes.
they were the new Irish. So that they came as they were, stayed as they were, learned the English language, which is the practicing language for in Ireland. It is the first and used language because Irish was suppressed under British rule. They learned that insofar as they have to, but only to the minimum, and they form ethnic communities within the country. As far as the illegal or legal immigration, that's a debate within. Well, it's certainly a debate within the spheres that are contemplating the consequences of this vast immigration.
Yes.
whether they are legal or illegal. But from a nationalist perspective, it cannot make any difference.
Absolutely.
It may make a difference in terms of vetting. It may make a difference in terms of the likely criminality of the import, if you like, and the new Irish, as the Liberals call them. It may make a small difference there that if they're willing to break the immigration laws, then they're more likely to be willing to break other laws as well. Right, fine, I get that. But actually, ultimately, it doesn't make any difference because this is our homeland. It is our only homeland, and we have nowhere else to go.
There you go. So that's the thing that I find very interesting. That you would say that the Liberals refer to these non-whites as new Irish. It's actually a very positive thing that they don't wish to concern themselves with learning Afrikaans, because I think you'll find this interesting. In South Africa, the nationalist movement and the birth of Afrikaner nationalism was done through a language movement that was known as Die Genootskap vir Regte Afrikaners, which was a language movement. And it bred, and from it sprouted the nationalist movement that formed the Nationalist Party that ultimately took control through political means from the English. Now, there was a man back in that time that fought vehemently with them. His name was Onze Jan Hofmeyer. And this scoundrel of a man, Onze Jan Hofmeyer, wished to include the non-whites, the coloreds, into the Afrikaner culture and identity because they spoke our language. And today it is something that has been reinvigorated, and they now refer to themselves not as the new Afrikaners, but they say the Afrikaanses, which is a form of the new Afrikaners. So just to go to the point that you made earlier, that it is a global effort by our enemies, and the things that they do in Ireland are the things that they do in South Africa. But you mentioned something that was very interesting to me. You mentioned the famine that was caused by the free market system. Now, that's something I would love for you to explain to our audience, because Paul Creer, which is the man at the back here behind my head on the flag there, he was a great leader, as well as Dalaray. But Paul Creer, in his 1882 presidential campaign, he said something. He basically laid out what he would run for and in his campaign, what his plan for South Africa was. And everything is so absolutely based and speaks of such a keen understanding of politics. But then he introduces this idea, which was interesting because his best friend was a man named Sammy Marx. Now, Sammy Marx, he isn't of the German Marx people. He's more of the Karl Marx people. He's a tribe member, you might say. And it's interesting because Paul Creer mentioned one point there, and he said, it is so essential that we defend the free market and free trade. Now, as an Irishman, if you were to dictate the economic systems in your country, do you think that free market trade is something that ultimately hurts the national identity, or do you think that it is something that a view that we should espouse? Free market capitalism, will that bolster our identity and strengthen us as a people, or will it harm us? And if so, could you elaborate as to why?
Well, just to go back specifically to the era of the famine, it was the economic policy pursued by the British Empire, which was absolute free trade, and within Ireland, the absolute suppression of the Catholic Irish population, because of laws that had gone back to the Reformation times and so on and so forth, which excluded Catholics from land ownership and so we had a Protestant ascendancy which was attached itself very much to the British ruling class, in Britain, and then we had the ordinary Irishman who was left to his own devices in that sense. And the dependence of the peasant farmer in Ireland upon the potato, the one single crop, was for a very simple and obvious reason, which a lot of people outside of Ireland don't understand, which is that a meal of potatoes and milk actually does create a full diet. It is not actually necessary. Now, I'm not saying it would be pleasant, but I'm saying it's not actually necessary for you to have anything else in your diet than potatoes and milk. If you have those two things, you can survive, and you can be healthy, and you can be strong. And indeed, the Irish peasant, as poor as he was physically strong, even though they were relegated to renting from the British landlords plots of land, sometimes as small as an acre, off which they were required to raise an entire family. Now, the only way you can do that on the size of the plots involved was to rely on this crop. That's one crop, the potato. It's not the only crop that was grown in Ireland. It was by far, but it was the only crop that was available to the average Irish person in any quantity that would sustain life or sustain family. And so we became absolutely dependent upon that. And when that failed, which it failed throughout Europe in those years. It failed throughout Europe. It failed in England too. But the difference is that the Irish were absolutely dependent upon it for their sustenance, for their basic sustenance. And the English free market ideology, which was laissez-faire in the French, let it be, was that if you depended upon potatoes to survive, and there were no potatoes upon which to survive, then the let it be, which is the ultimate free market ideology, is the let it be ideology is that, well, if you have nothing to eat, then you starve to death. I think nobody fully understands more than an Irishman what it actually means to say, well, we will have a free market. Because what they're doing is they're comparing, say, Western Europe or the United States to the Soviet Union or the Eastern Bloc countries during the Cold War, and they're going, oh well, there was great economic success in the West, relatively speaking, and there was relatively poor success under communist government. But of course, you didn't find yourself in the end question of the free market, because the end question of the free market, let it be, is if let it be means you're starved to death, then starve to death you must. And that was the attitude that was taken by the British government at the time. So can the free market produce economic efficiency? Can the free market produce a degree of economic freedom that is valuable within and of itself? Yes, it absolutely can. And it is undoubtedly the case that an absolutely planned economy is disastrous. We can see that, as I said, in the scenario of the Soviet bloc, and everywhere that communism or Marxist socialism has been tried. Having said that, looking at it from the other side, no European country except England has ever tried the absolute free market. The idea of not interfering even in the event of the death of large sections of its own population. Because strictly speaking, as Irish people, we were British people, understood in British law as British people. And yet the government policy was, well, if you starve to death, you just do. And we did. And the population of the country, between starvation and immigration, flight to America and Canada and Australia largely, went from 9 million to 3 to 3.5 million, and never really recovered. never really recovered from that until the last maybe maybe in the last 15 years, 20 years, we would have reached the three and a half, like more than 3.5 million for almost the first time. There was this constant bleed away of people because the free market system that was continued after the British garrison troops left, nonetheless left Ireland at the mercy of exactly that, the free market, and essentially operating under the same economic conditions and under the same economic hindrances as they had operated under British rule. And in the consequence, the Irish economy did not do terribly much better in the early stages of Irish so-called independence, or at least Southern independence, the independence of the 26 counties of the South, did not do noticeably better than it had done under British rule. And of course,
Yes.
because it was operating under the same rule book, it's just that the names of the enforcers had changed, as it were. And the Irish nationalist movement too actually has, or it's in its modern form, when I say modern, leading to independence, is it was a language movement as well. So we can very much parallel that. It was the Gaelic League and the revival of Irish ways of doing things, possibly primarily the language, but more successfully, I think, the return, like in practice, successfully, in terms of the number of people involved, the return of Irish national games and sports and so forth, and Irish ways of doing things, and not having this inferiority complex towards the English, but we still have it towards foreigners in general, and it is something that every Irish nationalist has tried to overcome. And part of it now is that it's associated this with the idea of the free market. The free market is associated with forward thinking in this country, no more than it is anywhere else. And it is associated, it is dramatically associated with prosperity in Ireland, despite the fact that it never particularly produced prosperity.
Well, Mr. Barrett, if I can quickly interject there, I don't want to cut you off because it's interesting what you have to say. Obviously, it's a very tragic. It's a great tragedy what happened in the Great Famine in Ireland, and it's so sad that a people must suffer these things. But I want to, in one of your speeches that I listened to, you made a very interesting point there, and I've got a book here written by D.F. Malan, in which he said something very beautiful about the Afrikaner people, but you almost said the same thing verbatim about the Irish people. So I do think I want to make that point about you. You just mentioning how the Irish people sometimes have inferiority complex, and you can elaborate on that a little bit and why they should not have that. But it is so with the Afrikaner people as well. After we were conquered by the British, you so often as a child, it infuriated me that my people would move to England to go live and work there when the English took our country from us. And why today I still believe that, alongside the tribe, obviously, but there is still very much a strong influence in South African scene by the British government. But in any way, what did D.F. Malan say? And then I just want to make a comment on the free market system, ask you a little question. He said, it has long been said that the history of South Africa is a tragedy that should sooner be forgotten so that we can focus on the things at hand, on the task at hand. But our history is no tragedy. It is nothing other than the highest artwork of the ages. We have a right to nationhood because it was given to us by the architect of the universe. And the goal of the architect was the forming of a new nation among the nations of the world. So this is something that it's akin to something that you said about the Irish people and their history not being a tragedy. So that's something I want you to comment on, why you say it is important, even though Ireland is a relatively small country, like the Afrikaner people are a relatively small group, why it is important to be proud, to be a proud Irishman, and why there is no cause for shame. And then after you answer that, I'm going to go back to the free market question that I have for you. So why do you, Justin Barrett, say that you need to be proud to be an Irishman and that you've got all the right in the world to be proud of being Irish?
Well, to a certain extent, the very fact that the Irish nation still exists is a testimony to the stoic hardness in the positive sense of the Irish people. The very fact that we got through the tragedy of that famine, the very fact that that indeed there was not one single generation of Ireland under British rule before the civil separation. This is the only way to describe it, because it was never a full divorce. The civil separation of Ireland and from the British Empire, or the what was left of it, is that we never. We always defined our Irishness in terms of its non-Englishness, and we had to do that in order to survive. And that led to the situation, whether we liked it or not. But we never let a generation go by without a significant body of Irishmen letting the British government know in physical force terms that British rule was not accepted in Ireland, that it would never be accepted in Ireland, and that there would always, whether it was a minority of Irishmen, whether it was, or even a fringe movement of Irishmen, but that there would always be a resistance, and that it would always manifest itself in an act of physical force, violence, if you want to call it that, in every single generation, and down to the time of what we would call the founding father of the Irish nation, is Pádraig Pearse, the first president of the Irish Republic, declared in 1916. He had exactly the same attitude as you have just described there for the Afrikaner people, was that he wrote, he was a poet himself in an extensive sense. But one of his shortest poems, and one of his most psychologically revealing ones, it's extremely short. It's I have seen the road ahead of me, the deed I shall do, and the death I shall die. That's the whole poem. There is nothing else there.
That's amazing. It's a great poem.
which means that when he went out as the president of the Irish Republic, and led those Irish volunteers who were willing to go with him into the various buildings in Dublin, which was largely where the Easter Rising took place, and so forth. He went out in the full knowledge that there was no possibility within this particular action of a military success. But what there was to keep up the tradition of saying that not one single generation of Irishmen shall live under foreign rule without a physical, violent protest being registered by a significant number of Irish men.
That is so amazing. I'm so sorry to interject on that, but I just have to say that alone is, I told you about the poet N.P. van Wyk that said it is a tragedy that a generation should pass and not rebel. He also wrote my favorite poem in Afrikaans, which is Maybe Yet We Will Die. And that poem is about two of the bittereinder, is what they called them, Boer commandos that were lying, hypothetically in or how do you say, as I don't know the word now, but in analogy, but they were laying in a trench saying that, oh man, there's no hope of winning. We are done. What's the point? Why do we fight? And then the one man says to the other, maybe it is so that we may die, and that one day we will be forgotten, and nobody will ever say something nice about us. But let every man that lies awaiting death know this, and have this solace, or take solace in this, that these tyrants could not bend us to their will, but that we could live free, loyal only to our blood and our blood alone. And what you just said about what that Irishman said, I think that's why we've got such a great admiration for the Irish people. Because perhaps just another short story, because on the 9th of March, this event took place in South Africa many, many years ago. It was called the Slagtersnek Rebellion hanging, where the people that rebelled against the English occupation of the Cape, and the laws that were imposed on them, rebelled. And why did they rebel? So there was this gentleman known as Cornelis Vreek Bezuidenhout, and there was this black, not for a lack of better word, but for a lack of freedom of expression. So there was this black that said that there was a loan dispute, and Cornelius said, bugger off, I couldn't care less what you say, I don't care. And the court came and they said that he needed to appear in front of the court, and he just, he didn't mind. He said, go your own way. So they pitched up with some black renegade to arrest him, and he refused to be arrested, and he retreated to a cave, and from there he violently resisted, as is, I believe, very appropriate in a situation like that. And he was unfortunately fatally wounded. Now, what is interesting is his brother, Hans Jan Bezuidenhout, he took a blood oath along with other Boers at that time, or other Afrikaners, to avenge the death of his brother. And so they did. Unfortunately, this didn't go and play out successfully. Without firing one single shot, their rebellion was thwarted. But he refused. The brother Hans Bezuidenhout refused to surrender. So he fled. And they pursued him, and his family and his wife, they retreated into a cave as well, and they resisted against upward of 200 soldiers, and they fought. Constantly, some of the local Boers would shout at him and say, no, you must surrender, but he refused. And he was several times wounded, and his wife and his son, to this day, Peter Bezuidenhout, and I forget his wife's name, but her surname was Faber. They are in the Euro Guild of South Africa for their deeds, because his dad bade him to stop, but they refused. He said, I will defend my dad. And when both his dad and his mother were so wounded that they could not continue fighting, he stood as a 12-year-old boy continuing to fight 200 soldiers. And that is the spirit of the Afrikaner people, and as I can deduce, the Irish people. So that's such a beautiful story that you told us. And it gave birth. It's like you said, it's so important, the tradition that it sets forth, but also the spiritual awakening that it caused, because it birthed the great track, which was in many people consider it to be the birth of our nation. So we must not, and we must never ever convince ourselves or allow ourselves to be convinced that futile resistance is a loss, because it can birth something absolutely great. So sorry for interjecting you there, but I just wanted to add to the conversation.
Not at all. This is where Irish history and Africana history ceases to run parallel and actually like smashes into each other, as it were. Because one of the leaders of the 1916 Rising, who was executed by the British for his involvement in that, John McBride was his name. He had led the Irish Transvaal Brigade, which was of Irish immigrants living in the British colony of South Africa had formed a volunteer brigade to fight in the Second Afrikaner, or the Boer War, 1899 to 1902, I think. And so some of his brigade would have literally been part of the bitter enders. They were known as the Wrecking Corps, which I suppose, militarily speaking, the Irish have often been. They were known by the Afrikaners as the Wrecking Corps, but strictly speaking, it was the Irish Transvaal Brigade. And their commander, they were all given honorary citizenship of the Boer republics, every member of the brigades. And John McBride went on subsequent to that to take part in the rising of Easter 1916 to fight the British again. So where some of our history is parallel, some of it is just right there in the same place at the same time, and even in the same people. So the sympathy of the Irish people, I don't like to use the word sympathy either, because it's so weak word. The heart of the Irish people in 1899 to 1902 was with the Boer republics. It was physically manifested in the Transvaal Brigade. And to this day, there is a monument to that. It's you'll know this place. I wouldn't. It's the Brixton Hill near Johannesburg.
Yes.
There's a monument there to the Irish who fought in the Boer War, and the inscription on it is written in both Afrikaner and in English, and it says, "Erected in remembrance of the Irish who fought for the Boer nation in its hour of need, 1899-1902. By their sacrifices for freedom and right, cast an everlasting bond between the Irish people and the Boer nation, and made this monument be a symbol thereof." So
amazing.
You might have to scramble through the bushes if you were to go to Johannesburg today to actually find this monument, because of course everything in the country is covered in trash now that it is in the control of foreigners. And
I can tell you. No, sorry.
Well, I just want to emphasize this for the Irish audience, because the Irish audience won't understand this, or is not familiar with this. The modern Irish audience is your country is occupied by foreigners. They are foreign to South Africa. They are foreign to that area. The main political leaders of the opposition to the Afrikaner nationalism today, the black leaders, I'm not even talking about the tribe or international finance capital or how it plays out on an international scale, but the black leaders themselves have a shorter lineage within the geographical area of South Africa than the average Dutch settler who would have arrived in the 1600s. The Bantu arrived far afterwards, and the Dutch arrived, and the Afrikaner people was founded on terra nullis. It was founded on empty land. There was no people there. There was nothing there. There had been nothing built there. Even the farmland was potential. It wasn't present. It wasn't obvious. The way settlers going to the United States, for example, immediately found an abundant wilderness. The Dutch who arrived in the Cape found no people, no animals, and no crops. They just found land that needed work and needed to be taken care of, and they brought out of that. They brought out of the land its life-giving capacity and created a place that drew in the Bantu.
Scavengers? Scavengers, yes.
In many ways. But of course, scavengers following the free market principle, which is that, we want to hire people that work for very little. These are the companies that had the protection of the British Empire. The companies that had the protection of the British Empire wanted workers that they could hire and pay very little money to. And it was life as, and this again is something that will be news to Irish people, it will be very much news to Irish people. Life for the South African, inverted commas, black person under apartheid was significantly better than anywhere else in sub-Saharan Africa, which is why they continued to come. Because there was this, and we have this in Ireland now as well. Like every black person who comes here goes, "Oh, you're so racist, and it's so awful to live here, and it's so terrible." And we say, as Irish nationalists, we say to them, "Well, then go home. It's so terribly bad here. Go home to where it is obviously much better, because you say it. We treat you so badly. We're happy for you to go home. We didn't invite you in the first place." And the same could be said for the Afrikaners and the South Africans, with the exception of the British government. The only invitation that South Africa ever made to a majority black population was the fact that there were economic opportunities in South Africa that were not available anywhere else.
Well, Mr. Barrett, I do have to interject there. So it's interesting. So yes, we did found there was animals here, obviously, but there's just not the potential within these nomads to cultivate anything of meaning in an agricultural sense. It's just a laughable idea in and of itself. But to the point of, a large influx of non-white immigrants. So why do we say that this country is ours, has always been ours, is as white as Ireland used to be, as white as Ireland used to be, which is not the case anymore for Ireland, like you just said, previously. So after the Anglo-Boer War, Lord Alfred Milner in 1902, just after the war ended, he said, "It is no longer a war fought with bullets, but it remains a war still." And then in 1910, he formed the Union of South Africa, abolishing all the borders that separated non-whites and blacks. And then in 1911, they did the first census of South Africa. And when they did the census of South Africa, they said that, there are 4.8 million native black people, which is a lie. It's a total lie. It's nonsense. It's the biggest nonsense that I've heard in a long time. It's the complete, utter hogwash. So that's what they did there. And then the people that formulated this entire thing of expropriation without compensation were all ethnic Jews. 5 of them formulated the Freedom Charter, and they were all coming here after the Second Anglo-Boer War. All of them coming here from Lithuania, Latvia, and all of these countries. So yes, South Africa is the white man's land. And this Lord Alfred Milner, he actually brought into South Africa 100,000 non-whites to come and work on the mine, blacks, and 30,000 Chinese men. So yes, by the abolishment of the borders and by the influx of literally foreign immigrants from Central Africa into South Africa, they managed to completely misconstrue the South African demographic situation. And that's actually a segue to a question that I have for you. So maybe you can give insight to the Afrikaner people. Maybe you can inspire them a little bit, because I do think my people need a little bit of inspiration, especially on the grounds of principle. So there's this new idea of a folk state in South Africa, where they push ideas, ridiculous ideas and notions such as Éireann, where they would say we need to concede our fatherland for a little patch of 40 by 40 kilometers because it's what's obtainable. And we need to concede the entirety of our fatherland to these black invaders. They only want a part, and they are content with a federalist system. That you listen, in the future, you're going to hear a lot of free market capitalism, the private sector taking over in South Africa, and a federalist system. That's what the people with the surnames, typically such as Goldstein, Berg, Schickelgrabber, would superimpose on my people and all of their lackeys. But in any way, so would you, as an Irish nationalist, there's a man, I did a little bit of research, in my own way as a layman on the Irish history. And it was interesting for me. I couldn't understand why the Irish people settled for only a portion of Ireland, why they didn't want Northern Ireland as well. And I constantly heard this name, Éireann de Valera, and he was presented as this great intellectual and whatever. And as I understand, he led a great push for South and Northern Ireland. I don't know. You can correct me there if I misunderstand. But do you think the Irish people deserve the entirety of Ireland? Is Ireland for the Irish in its entirety, or should the Irish people be content with only a small part of Ireland, or even 80% of Ireland? Should they have 100%, or should they be content with 80%? And on that same principle, do you think the Afrikaner people should be content with giving away their country for a semblance of peace?
Well, I'll tell you the answer to that straight. In realpolitik, because this is how it's put to you. It's realpolitik. Is you can't have South Africa back, or they'll say to you, you can't have apartheid back. Well, you don't want apartheid back.
No, we don't. We don't.
That was a damn good try at managing a multiracial system, and it was. And as I said, it created a South Africa that drew blacks from all over the continent to apartheid South Africa. But it was a damn good try at managing a multiracial society. Probably one of the best efforts that has ever actually been made. It didn't work. And the pragmatism here is quite the opposite of what people say. If you ask for less, you will get nothing at all. That is what will happen. Yes, if you can have complete freedom of an independence in a smaller geographical area, it does pragmatically seem like a better plan or a better idea, or something that you should accept and sounds more reasonable. And then the other people who are here, they have no right to be here, mind you, but they can have this place here. And this is exactly what happened in our country, is that in the northeast of the country was the area which resisted British rule for the longest. So that when that was finally broken, they physically removed the population and replaced it with loyalists to the British Crown. Not terribly ethnically different to the native Irish people. In fact, not really ethnically different at all. They were Scots Gaels largely, so they were even Gaelic. But they were loyal to the British Crown, and that was the reason why they were moved here. And when the Irish independence movement, when Britain had to accept as a result of Ireland's War of Independence, that a measure of independence had to be given to Ireland, it was actually the British government who came up against the problem of these people that they had moved into a section of Ireland, who then said, we are not going to be, we will be part of the 32 county Ireland in the context of under London rule, but we will not be part of an Ireland under Dublin rule. And so we demand our own independent state, which they were given. And that was done before the Irish Free State was actually established, or the treaty was actually ever written, was that 6 counties of the northeast would have an opt-out clause. But of course, this was an utterly artificial population, which had been moved by the British government into its most troublesome area of Ireland, so that it no longer caused any trouble. And then ironically, what they have now, of course, is the British government would just assume, because they are under the control of globalist Jews as well, the same as we are under the control of globalist Jews. So to them now, it doesn't make any sense that there should be a border, or there should be. So they are quite, the British establishment is quite happy to concede the idea of Irish unification, except the problem is they deliberately created Irish disunification when it suited them. And when it suited them, they embedded within the country a plantation population. That is, people moved deliberately from the outside. And then in 1920, they said, at the time of the treaty, they said, well, these people don't want to be part of a united Ireland. Well, there was always England to go home to, or Scotland to go home to. But they weren't going home. They were staying in Northern Ireland. Well, okay, if you're staying in Northern Ireland and you're ethnically Gaelic, well, we can make some constitutional arrangement around that. But what we cannot do is politically divide the island. But politically divide the island they did. And in exactly the same way, is by declaring that the majority, not the majority of the Irish people in totality, but the majority of the Irish people in this particular area wanted to remain under British rule, so that area would remain under British rule. And that's why we have partition to this day. And it is probably, from the globalist capitalist point of view and from even the British establishment's point of view, partition is no longer has a role to play. But of course, they changed the demographics, and because they changed the demographics, now we have a hard core of people in this country who maintain themselves to be British, even though they are not. And so, partition has its origin in this artificial population movement as well. So we well understand what it is to be told that people who arrived here yesterday are just the same as you are and have just as much rights as you are, and if we're going to vote it that way. Now, the 1916 Rising, which started the Irish War of Independence, had no democratic mandate at all. None, not anything. The political party which represented full independence from Britain got almost no votes in the election previous to 1916. The leaders of the 1916 Rising never even took part in the previous British general election in any shape, fashion, or form, or any form of electoral politics prior to launching the rebellion. They had been planning the rebellion, planning it from America partly and planning it from within Ireland partly, but they had been planning it since forever. And their principle was exactly as you say, is not 1 inch of ground and not 1 inch of principle can be surrendered under the name of the Irish nation, because that is a pragmatic solution. Because before us at the time, there was the idea which had been presented and actually had been managed to pass through parliamentary maneuverings by constitutional nationalists, a home rule bill, which was limited independence and would have given Ireland a considerable degree of independence compared to direct rule from Westminster. But the people who went out in 1916 said, no, we're not interested. We're not interested in your home rule bill. And we are not interested in anything less than a complete separation. And for us, because Britain was a monarchy, that meant being Republican. But it was separatism more than anything else. And it must be complete separation. And how can you barter some of the territory? It's almost more obvious because Ireland is an island. It's more obviously a savage cut through the land to actually draw a border anywhere on it. And the natural wholeness of the island is present geographically. But that as a political principle has been carried down to the present day, and it's something that we certainly support. We regard ourselves, and we very firmly as a Republican movement, not only in terms of the form of government we would like to see introduced into Ireland, because I don't believe we have a proper republic. We have a republic in name, but we don't have a republic in practice. And a lot of people don't even understand what a republic in practice would actually be in terms of personal liberties and individual rights. But in terms of separation from England, we have no reason for hostility, and most Irish people would agree on this. No reason for an ongoing hostility with England except for its occupation of the 6 counties of Northern Ireland, or the northeast counties of Ireland. If you back away and say in South Africa that, okay, we can't have the territory that we originally, our ancestors originally arrived and took control of and cultivated and created a nation out of. We can't have all of that because there's X number of people that are also have come in since, which was exactly what was put to us. In the current political circumstances that you're facing in South Africa, the reality, and anybody has to know this, anybody with a brain has to know this, is that they will talk about this free state, this Afrikaner free state forever. The same as we talked about home rule in Ireland. It dominated Irish politics for 60, 70 years of the 19th century. The argument will go on while about this portion of land, which is not your birthright area anyway. It's already asking you, it's not even saying we'll get 80% of what we want. No, we will get 80% of what our birthright is. We will get 80% of that taken from us. But we will do that in order to get the 20%. I would say to any South African that the Irish example proves that if you attempt out of realpolitik to accept 20% of your birthright in return for it being so-called politically practical, you will get none of your birthright at all in practice.
100%. 100%, Mr. Barrett. I have to comment on that, especially with the use of the term realpolitik, which is a very loathsome, I believe, to be very moronic term. You know, the politics of the obtainable. It's such a some would say. I wouldn't say Jewish term, but some would say Jewish term. You know, it's something that they so often want to equate. You know, there's this little Shabos guy here in South Africa. His name is Flip Buys. Probably one of the biggest proponents of anybody that speaks Afrikaans is an Afrikaner. Everybody that wants to, you know, assimilate to our values, regardless of their race, is Afrikaner. So he says that Otto von Bismarck and Henry Kissinger are the biggest proponents and of realpolitik. And a quote that they so often use to enforce this, you know, that Otto von Bismarck was a man that believed in realpolitik, is the quote in which he said, "Politics is the art of the possible, the attainable, the art of the next best." He actually said the second best. How in any way is that espousing the views of we must fight for what is possible? If you juxtapose it to his very first thing that he said when he went to Parliament, he said, at the end of the day, it's not political speeches or majority decisions that will decide the fate of future, but it is blood and iron. So we must loosen ourselves of this ridiculous notion that we must pursue that which is politically possible. We must not pursue what is politically possible. We must pursue what is just and what is ours. We must have a moral and a value-based political pursuit, not a practical political pursuit. That is nothing other than pacifying our people, to pacify them into what they want us to accept. They want you to accept that Ireland must be divided. They want us to accept that the Boers can never have our country. Why can't we have our country? Why must we negotiate over that which is ours by birthright?
And indeed, the very origin of the phrase, the origin of the concept, of course, is exactly as you say. It's a bargaining. It's everything is a deal. Everything can be haggled out. What's called? It's only a matter of how many coins we clip. we can clip around South Africa. We can keep clipping the coin of South Africa until it is so small that it disappears into thin air. But
they must continue talking about clipping coins, and we might just. I wouldn't say it,
Otto von Bismarck, as the Prime Minister of Prussia, when he set out on the unification of Germany after 5 centuries of the little principalities and so on and so forth, what Otto von Bismarck set out to achieve was the ultimate in unrealpolitik, because it was the idea that here's what we will do: is first we will fight the Austrians and we will beat them. Then we will fight the Danes and we will beat them. And then we will fight the French and we will beat them. And then when we have beaten all of these people, then we will have a united Germany. Now, if he had presented that as anything other than the policy of the Prime Minister, if that had been presented by a political party at a general election in Germany, it would have been considered absolutely daft. So here's what you want to do, right? You want to take this place, which has known peace now for 200-300 years, because Germany is, in the image of the Western mind, Germany is associated with war all the time. But actually, before the 20th century, Germany was regarded as the territory on which other countries' armies used to march back and forth on, and really the Germans themselves were the most pleasant and peaceful people who didn't want any trouble and didn't want any bother and didn't really care which flag was flying, as long as you leave them alone on their farm, and that is the German history. And to tell these people that, well, okay, there are of all the European great powers, and the European great powers at that time were the world great powers. Of all the European great powers, we're going to fight 3 of them. We're going to beat them. And we are going to undo 400 to 500 years of German history and create a unified state. Another thing that Bismarck said, as well as realpolitik, that is the politics of the obtainable. He also said the great questions of the day will not be decided by parliamentary majorities, but will be decided by blood and iron. And that is what anybody who has any memory of Bismarck's policy in government would actually remember, that he was the blood and iron chancellor, and he was the chancellor of the foundation of the German Empire. And I don't even know if that word is really applicable to joining together the Germanic states. And the only flaw and the only fault that can be found in what Bismarck created was that it did not contain all of the German people. That by necessity, and again, realpolitik, it left the Austrians out and they were left in a polyglot state, which was always in instability, and so it was an unreliable ally to Germany in the First World War. Collapsed.
Well, Mr. Barrett, just to interject, isn't that what a great man that wrote a book about a struggle? Didn't he exactly say that? Didn't he say that, the great problem was, why was Austria not included in this? So, as you very, very rightfully point out there,
Austria, the Sudetenland, and of course there were Germans scattered. But look, we don't want to go into German history. I'll go in a very more restricted way. I'll talk about German history sometime with the German. But the idea that anything magnificent in this world is ever created by anything other than what is in the first instance an unrealistic idealism and a crazy idea. Napoleon Bonaparte said, all greatness requires a little intelligent madness. And I think there's something in that.
South Africa for the white man. South Africa for the white man.
Requires a little intelligent madness. Now, so what do we mean? Well, we mean we're not saying we will be stupid. We're not saying we will take on forces that we cannot take on. We'll not say that. But we will say this, is that we will not be told by our enemies what it is to be pragmatic and what it is to be reasonable, because their definition of reasonable will always be our surrender, whether it's the surrender of the Irish people or the German people, the French people, the Italians, or the Boer. Their reasonable opinion will always be for you to shut up and take what you're given. And that is what will result from any policy that is based on the idea of pragmatism, rather than the idea of principle. That this is the land of my birthright. This is the land in which I was born in. And by the way, by the same token, no retreat either to any place else that will offer us refuge. No retreat. Donald Trump's nonsense is, and it is nonsense because he probably wouldn't give it to you anyway. But it's another thing to hang out in front of the Afrikaner people and say, maybe this carrot, you chase this.
Yeah, don't fight for what is yours. Yeah, exactly, Mr. Barrett.
Chase after this possibility that you might go to America and live there for a while, or chase after this possibility that you might get a little part of what used to be yours, and it will be given to you by people who hate you. They hate you with the very fiber of their being. Every fiber of their being, they hate you.
Absolutely, Mr. Barrett. So well said.
Those who are not naturally minded to hate you will be indoctrinated by the Jewish international financial power to hate you. So if they arrive to your country indifferent, with no opinion whatsoever, the non-governmental organizational structure backed by the money of George Soros and people like this, it is a cliche. It is a cliche for a reason, Soros money. It's a cliche for a reason because it's there. Soros,
well, Mr. Barrett, to go to what you are saying, it is so absolutely true, because Nelson Mandela, which was considered to be a revolutionary, is why he was arrested, started the ANC Youth League in 1943. But he didn't start it of his own accord. He started it after being introduced by a bastard, person of possibly Jewish descent. And then he introduced him to Nat Bregman and Lazar Sadilsky, one being a lawyer, one being a radio personality, that also came here after the Anglo-Boer War. And it is they that implored Nelson Mandela to become a revolutionary. And it is his friends, Roo First, Ethel Drest, Lionel Bernstein, Alan Lipman, and Beata Lipman, that wrote the ANC Freedom Charter that said that they must occupy land wherever they go. Even in his trial, Nelson Mandela admitted in the Rivonia trial that he was a foreigner. He was a foreigner. He didn't even claim South Africa. So it is so true what you say, that even the ones that are apathetic to the Boers, they will hatred will be instilled into them for us. We cannot forge a future built on the gratitude or the kind-heartedness supposedly of our enemies. If we wish to forge a future, it must be in the iron will and the unification of our people behind a political will. That is how we forge a future. And that's that's perhaps a good segue into our next question for you, Mr. Barrett. There's from the audience, obviously, questions that we'll get to, but would you tell us more about Clann Éireann, and what does Clann Éireann mean for the Afrikaners, and also maybe the other English people listening, or European people? What does Clann Éireann mean, and what do you hope to achieve with your movement?
Well, what I would say is that the process as it has developed in Ireland, particularly with regard to immigration, which is demographic replacement, and I call it a Nazi theory. So, oh well, it's a Nazi theory, so that's fine then. We won't argue about whether the Nazis came up with it. But since it's only come up with in the last 20, 30 years, 40 years at the most, and was come up with by a Frenchman, the actual phrase. Whatever though, but we're not interested in arguing with whether it's a Nazi idea or not. The fact of the matter is the vast majority of Irish people faced with the Great Replacement as a reality are opposed to it. The problem is that there is no organization behind that. There are many organizations behind that sentiment, and there are many individuals who have that sentiment who will not get involved in actual political organization because they feel that they have different opinions on different things. And one of the reasons why Clann was formed, as opposed to, for example, the National Party, which was the party that I founded in 2016, which was a direct tribute from me. And I will admit this now, and it will go out on Twitter. So this broadcast will become famous for me having admitted this. It'll become famous in Ireland anyway. It was meant as a tribute to Hendrik Verwoerd. It was purposely meant. It was not by accident. If you look at the National Party symbol in Ireland and the National Party symbol in South Africa, the old one, you will see the similarities immediately. That is because I designed the symbol and named the party. And
that is amazing.
And in particular, please don't tell me anything bad about Hendrik Verwoerd, because he has been a hero of mine throughout my childhood and throughout my adulthood. And I can still consider him to be one of the greatest Western men of honor that ever lived. So if you have anything bad, say, just get it out of the way so I don't have the pain.
The bad thing that I will say about Hendrik Verwoerd is that he didn't survive his assassination attempt, his last assassination. You know, that's the only bad thing I can say about the man. He was a great man. He was our leader. You know, there's this great Prussian general, von Clausewitz. Von Clausewitz said that politics or war is the natural continuation of politics, which makes sense from a white man's mind. But the inversion was then presented by Lenin, the tribe member, and he said that politics is the natural continuation of war by other means. And isn't it interesting that not more than 2 weeks after Hendrik Verwoerd initiated the border war, he was killed. Why? Why was he killed? So that his politics could not come into fruition in its totality in the war. He was not to be allowed to be the leader in a time of war, because then apartheid would have been solidified forever. And, Hendrik Verwoerd, Jaap Marais, absolute heroes of ours. I can't believe I didn't see that, the National Party. That's so amazing, Mr.
Have a look. Have a look. Clann is designed because we thought we could give, to be blunt about it, everything is a learning exercise. We thought we could give simply political expression to this rejection of the Great Replacement. And what we found in reality is that you couldn't form an organization. You could form an organization. We did form an organization, but you couldn't gather a critical mass of people together. Because within the rejection of the Great Replacement theory, or within the rejection of the Great Replacement reality, necessitated a rejection of international finance capital. So that's fine. Now you've lost some people already because they're going, what do you mean international finance capital? And if you tell them who it actually is, that it is the Jews, well, then you've lost them entirely. And so, so if you're just involved in electoral politics and all you want is the maximum number of ballot papers marked with your party's name, it's not a good idea to explain why all of these immigrants are coming in at such a rate that it is a great replacement. It is not a good idea to explain to them who is behind the great replacement, which is international finance capital, which benefits from it, cheap labor, largely speaking, and the dilution of the national identities of all the European and Western nations. And it is especially, and so then, if you're trying to explain what is actually happening in the country without actually explaining what's happening in the country, then what you end up with is actually a tiny minority of very confused people who are actually in any kind of organization, even on a list of names. So what Clann was designed to do was to bring an ideological framework to the idea that we were to oppose the Great Replacement. We were to oppose the Great Replacement, yes, because this was our island, or this was the island of our birth, and it belonged to us as the Irish people, and it belonged by a blood right, and it doesn't belong, by the way, by any ideology, and it doesn't belong by any philosophy of government or any form of government, or for that matter, any economic notion of how the economy should be run. But as a matter of practicality, in the current situation that we are in, how did we get into the situation that we are in? As Marcus Aurelius said, of each particular thing, ask what is it within itself. So how did we get to the situation we are in? The vast majority of Irish people who are opposed to the Great Replacement do not consider it the Great Replacement, first instance, and in the second instance, do not yet accept that it is deliberate. And those who accept it is deliberate argue over why it is deliberate. And those who accept why it is deliberate argue over who is behind it being deliberate. And those who accept who is behind it being deliberate then ask the question, well, what would you replace it with in practical terms? And that is where you do have an obligation to give a pragmatic answer. You do have an obligation to give an answer. This is what Ireland would look like if we had what we wanted. Absolutely and totally what we wanted. And this is the point at which ideology comes in. And this is the point at which a nationalist movement must intake within itself some kind of ideology, because it must offer an alternative to the established powers and the established government and the established system. And it must look to the people that it is being presented to as something that could actually work. There is the place for realpolitik in reality. And that is what Clann is for more than anything else, is to bring ideology to the notion of Irish nationalism. Because there are a lot of Irish nationalists who think nationalism is an ideology, which it isn't. And like I grew up with, again, I have to go back to I'm of what people on the dissident right in Ireland call the boomer generation, very much so, right? I actually discovered that technically I'm Generation X, but I'm not going to argue. With anybody about it. I've been around a long time. Let's just put it that way. I've been around a long time, and I've been in politics for a long time because I've been in politics since I was 5. So I got a head start there. And in that sense is what I knew as a child was that as an Irish boy, that I should love my country, Ireland, was just axiomatic. It was just a fact. That was not an opinion. That was not an ideology. That was not a point of view. That was when I was first confronted, and God knows I don't remember when I was first confronted with somebody who said otherwise, that love of country was not the inherent as the hand on the end of my arm, that there was another way of looking at it, maybe that we would be part of the European Union and we would have a European identity through that, or we would have a global identity through being humanists, or we would have all of these things were non-things. But a lot of people now, because there is so much anti-national forces in all of the countries, and they are the dominant forces in all of the Western white countries, they have come to believe that nationalism is an ideology, that it is an opinion, that it is the opinion you should hold, but it is nonetheless an opinion that some people hold and some people don't. And it's something you can argue about. No, it is not. No, it is not. We can argue about tax policy. We can argue even about borders. We can argue about the economic policies to be, but whether Ireland is Ireland or South Africa is South Africa is just a fact. And only the retarded enter the ring on the other side. And they must be treated as being as politically retarded as they actually are, no matter how eloquent or articulate of speech they happen to be.
Oh, that is such a great answer, Mr. Barrett. I say this not to flatter you, but that the answer on what is Clann Éireann, if that does not move you to join Clann Éireann, then perhaps politics is not for you. It just speaks to an absolute keen understanding of what needs to be done. It's amazing. I've got a comment here from YouTube that says Justin is not only the leadership needed in Ireland, he's the leadership needed in all countries founded by European stock. I cannot agree more with that. That is an excellent explanation, Mr. Barrett. That's so why it's such a great honor and privilege having you on to be able to interview a man like yourself. But I quickly need to excuse myself, but I'm going to give you a question that you can answer for the audience. I know what you're going to say, so that's why I'm going to excuse myself quickly. But for the audience, do you think, in the context of what you just said about Clann Éireann and what it expresses and seeks to achieve, do you think that we need to, police our language or be optic cucks, so to speak? Do you think that we should distance ourselves from so-called radical politics, that National Socialism cannot be made mainstream again? What are your thoughts on that? I'll leave you to answer that question while I quickly step away.
Well, I can tell you that I have tried it every other way. That's how I know, is that I began politically and ideologically as a child, understanding things. Only subsequently did I realize there was a label that one could put on it. It was called National Socialism. But having said that, by late, I mean, I read Mein Kampf when I was 8. So that to me is considered late. I consider that late between the conversation with the member of Allende's government and that it took me 3 years to get from anti-communism to full National Socialism. I tried everything else because exactly for the same reasons. All those arguments that are made by those people who make those statements were convincing to me at some point in my life. This is how you can get some of what you want. If you say it this way, if you present it in this manner, if you dress it up in a certain language, if you deny some things, if you never lie, because that's something that I held to. But of course, in a court of law, when you put your hand on a Bible, they ask you to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. For a long time in politics, what I did was I told the truth and nothing but the truth. But I did not tell the whole truth. I never told, to my awareness, I never told a deliberate lie in my entire career in public life, but I often withheld what I fully thought because exactly that. I thought it was more pragmatic, or it was easier to achieve, or it was more practical. And it's not that I don't have some practical achievements to my name as a result of having taken what I would call the conservative route first, and gone down the path of engaging in lobby politics of the political establishment to achieve limited goals and limited aims. I achieved some things, but as time went by, it became clearer and clearer that fundamentally the country was being destroyed. That fundamentally this small victory here, this small victory there in terms of electoral politics, or a referendum won or a referendum lost, these did not really matter in terms of the overall trajectory upon which the Irish nation was directed. And as I looked back over my life and I looked at all of the various guises under which I stood and all the ways in which I presented myself, optically speaking. Now, the main thing that I'm actually accused of in Ireland is not being tall. They only discovered this in the past decade. But in any case, I suppose when I stopped running away from National Socialism, they were stuck with the fact that I wasn't very tall. Now there's I won't get into that, except for the fact that, like, you know, I am aware of my height.
So, Mr. Barrett, there's a saying in Afrikaans, klein botteltjie groot grif. So small bottle, big poison, you know?
Well, that's probably what they would actually say. I've said the term poison dwarf has been used. Now, I'm not actually, because it's an actual national secret. And
I do mean that, I mean that in the sense that,
I do, and I know what you mean, poison to the enemy. And the enemy refers to me that way. But my actual height is practically a national secret. My wife knows what height I am, and I know. And nobody else, not even in Clann, knows what height I am, because I want them to continue to let's worry about what height Justin Barrett is, while I form a national socialist movement right under your very eyes. And this is the thing you notice? That he's not tall enough to have been in the SS. Really? I knew that. I knew that when I was as a child, when I realized that I would never be a member of An Garda Síochána because I wasn't tall enough. I've got it. I've got used to it. 40 years of being not tall kind of gets you pretty accustomed to that.
Well, Mr. Barrett, I am a tall man, but I will tell you this. If I were an Irishman or if I were in Ireland, I would certainly put all my weight behind you as a leader, because it is not the physicality of a leader that makes him such, but it is the will and the ideas that he inspires in his people. And for that, you do not need a big body, but you do need a big mind, and you do need a big heart. And you need an unwavering and relentless will to enforce those ideas. So I wouldn't want to use profanity, but, you know, or when people would say such a thing to them, you know, tell them to, I don't know, go to a war.
Go away. Is that what you go away with 4 letters, spelling go. Yes. Look, as I say, I don't worry about it. But what I want to get across, I think, is that in terms of moderating your politics in order to achieve more, there are few people in the world who can say that they have tried the politics of moderation more than I have, given that deep underlying this all the time, there has been no political change. And this is something that the left have actually commented on in Ireland. They have said, since I have been openly National Socialist, actually use the word and make reference to Adolf Hitler himself as a person, as an individual, as a real human being that lived in the 20th century as a great man. They have said, aha, there, we have told you all along, that's what he was. Well, I have been trying to do so as well, but I have been trying to do so without the optical downside And what I have found is to try to do it without the optical downside isn't possible either. And all you end up is the optical downside is there through the accusation. But you can't answer it because you haven't the courage to answer it. Okay, because the answer to, oh, well, I don't think the Irish people should be replaced by blacks and browns and yellows and reds. Oh, that makes you a Nazi. No, I'm not a Nazi. Oh, that makes you a racist. Oh, I'm not. None of those things. That is not a good place to have retreated to before you start arguing the question. People in Ireland are still accustomed to the idea that saying, I'm not racist, but is actually a viable political option. It isn't. And I can tell this not from, I could tell it from some kind of ideological perspective or some kind of like written text or, and so forth that have been written by smarter people than me. But I can tell you from practicalities, from actually doing politics on the ground, that unless you are willing to say that the reason why Ireland must remain the homeland of the Irish people, and that the Irish people be defined by their ethnic and racial heritage, that is in fact racist, that you accept its racism and you accept the logical conclusions of that, and that you do not have a problem with that. What you have a problem with, what I do have a problem with, is anybody saying to me that I hate people based on the fact that they are another race. I do hate people who are in my country who are of another race. But I hate some of my own countrymen too for having brought them here. And I hate them more. And yes, do I have hate in my heart? Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I have some. I have some. Because if I don't have hatred for the people outside my house trying to get in, then I have no love for the people in my house trying to stay safe. Which is to say, if I don't stand in the doorway in defense of my wife and my children, then I don't love them at all. I don't love them at all. And if
But that
I
is exactly
hatred for the people who try and get in and harm them, deliberately harm them, then I have no love for them at all. All talk of love and kindness and humanity and compassion, it's all fake. It's all nonsense. When your own children's lives were on the line, when your own wife's life was on the line, you cared about optics more. You cared about social prestige more. You cared about presenting yourself as a nice person more than you cared about them. That's not good enough. And I would be quite happy if my wife, I'll say it to her now because I know she's listening. If she says to me, I'm leaving you, if you ever say that to me, I'm leaving you, if you will, if I have an enemy, if I have a deathly enemy in life, me, your wife, if I have a deathly enemy in my life, and you don't hate them with me, then I'm leaving you. I will say, fine, you're right. You're right to go. You're right to go and find somebody who will hate your enemies with you. And I think when that is transferred onto the political stage, and Pádraig Pearse in particular was one of the reasons why we called the new organisation Clann, is it means the family of Ireland. And he said the definition of a nation was the family grown large. So the analogy with the family is constant through Irish nationalism. And so I would say the same thing is that when it comes to as against my neighbor and my children come first. It's not out of hatred.
100%, sir. If you cannot,
his children come before the people 100 miles away. Irish children, all of them, come before non-Irish children everywhere. White children come before all other children anywhere. And if the African and the blacks can stay where they belong, then they don't bother me and I won't bother them. And I don't need to hate them. In fact, I don't need to have any opinion about them at all. And in fact, I did have no opinion about them at all. And,
Exactly.
I was a National Socialist without being a racist, which is to say that I had no opinion about black people. None whatsoever. How could I form an opinion about people I'd never met?
Well, Mr. Barrett, to that point, no conversation or, explanation could make a man a racist better than exposure to blacks. So if you really want to make a man a racist, there's a saying in South Africa, what's the difference between a racist and a tourist? 2 weeks. 2 weeks. So the reality is what you say.
That is something that people say, is that racism is based on ignorance. Well, how come then it's only in the places where black people live alongside white people that white people are racist?
Exactly. And the other thing,
who live in all white areas can afford the luxury of being not racist.
Exactly.
I would suggest it is anti-racism that is based on ignorance. It is
absolutely.
But I would like an anti-racism formed of the ignorance of what black people are like. I would like a racism in Ireland, an anti-racism formed of not knowing what Indian people are like, or Malaysian people are like, or Chinese people are like. And I would love an anti-Semitism formed on the ignorance of any Jew.
Oh, that's amazing.
Ignorance of the Jews. If I don't know, I don't want to know anything about them. I don't want my children to. I'm going to have to tell them, and it is of great reluctance to me that I do tell them. But I would love this. I have one child who is only one, and I would love if he never has to know what a Jew is.
Absolutely, sir. The other thing that they also.
The anti-Semitism of ignorance. That is a beautiful thing, but we can't have it. We can only have the anti-Semitism of knowledge, and the anti-Semitism of facts, and the anti-Semitism of history, and the anti-Semitism of experience. And I'm afraid they're going to get that one way or the other, but they are either going to get it before their first encounter with this problem, which they will be confronted with at immediate disadvantage, or they will be confronted with this problem with foreknowledge. The greatest protection that any Irishman can give, or any South African father either, can give to his daughter, is to raise her a racist. That is, because this will prevent her. She will get to racism eventually, one way or the other. She will get to racism, or she will get to the grave. One way or the other.
So, Mr. Barrett, yes, so that's a point that I want to make. So there's this notion that racism is taught and it's not inherent. But, it's such a logical fallacy, going to your point, because what in life is not taught? Your name, Justin, was taught to you. You had to learn everything that you know. Every single skill that you know had to be taught to you. So just like you just said, and so eloquently said, that if a father truly loves his son and his daughter, he would teach them racism. He would teach them to be prejudiced, because prejudging a situation leads to positive outcomes for individual as well as a group.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if we do not have the right to do so, then we do not have the right to live, if you think about it.
Yes, really, that is it ultimately. And signs on is, if you don't have this attitude, you won't live for very long. And any people who has ever adopted an attitude of not understanding this has not lived very long as a consequence of not understanding it. But of course, they they will tell you, for example, and you see, this is why the white man is always guilty. The white man is always guilty, whether he's English, whether he is German, whether he's Italian, whether he is whatever, he's African, doesn't matter. But because what is the experience of immigration for the Native American? What is his experience? Oh, there are only a few white people. They have just landed on Plymouth Rock. There doesn't seem to be many of them. Do they seem to be causing much trouble? No, they seem a quiet sort. They like to pray to some god. We don't know what it is. But they go in and it has this cross thing on it. We don't understand it. But there's not many of them. Don't worry. There's plenty of room. Plenty of room. And then there's more of us. And there's still plenty of room. No, plenty of room, plenty of room. And then there isn't plenty of room anymore. And then there's less and less room. And there's people who will come back at us and say, oh, the white man genocided the Red Indian. Well, if the white man genocided the Red Indian, it was because the Red Indian was not racist enough to understand that he should have driven the first European colonizers off Plymouth Rock. And when he did not do that, he had surrendered fundamentally to the idea that the Europeans were here and they were here to stay. And then he had fundamentally abandoned his birthright. And by the time the American Indian tribes managed to sum up enough racism, it was too late. And that will happen to the white man too. And we will find ourselves eventually, if we are lucky. But the funny thing about that is, and we go back to this, is the whole idea of compassion and love and empathy and so on and so forth. This is absolutely a white characteristic. You don't find this among the other races. They don't have empathy for other people. They have a very innate tribalism. And they are absolutely and utterly unashamed of it. And it is promoted by every mainstream agency as being the right attitude for them to take. So fine. If what is good for them, then it's good for us. If protecting our own is necessary for them, then it is necessary for us. And that is all we are saying. That is all we are saying. I don't want a farm in Kenya. I don't want any oil rights in Saudi Arabia. Only international finance capital wants that. And your history in South Africa shows that too. Is international finance capital wasn't interested in plowing the fields and wasn't interested in raising the livestock and growing the crops. International finance capital became fascinated with South Africa as soon as there was gold and diamonds. And then there was this idea, oh, South Africa belongs to the world. And Ireland now too, in the Western Europe. It belongs to the whole world. Why? Because we have something they want to take from us. And they must guilt us into giving it to them. Because ultimately, as a united force within this country, but as a united force worldwide, our actual enemy's physical ability to prevent us having what we want, if we're determined that we want it and we're going to have it, is negligible. It is negligible. Yes. And we are only at the precipice of extinction because of our own self-destructive mindset. Well, now it has been put there by a certain group, yes, and we know that by propaganda. It has been put there, but it can be got out, and there is no point in making an excuse either for saying, "Oh well, this is a Jewish idea, so therefore it's not my fault." No, it is. It is your fault if you know it's a Jewish idea and you continue to run your Irish country, your South African country, your American country according to an idea that is fundamentally Jewish.
100%.
Because a Jewish idea for Israel is a Jewish idea that works. A Jewish idea anywhere else is a Jewish idea that works for Israel.
Absolutely. That's very well put, Mr. Barrett. I want to bring it to your attention that we are almost at the 500 viewer mark. So this is a very popular stream. We've got 475 people viewing. We want to say to all the viewers, thank you very much for tuning in and supporting our stream. Please go check out Justin Barrett's social media. I will share it shortly here for you guys to see. Follow him on X. And he can tell you towards the end of the stream on what platforms you can all find him. You can follow him. You can follow me. But what you say is so fundamentally true that we cannot make apologies for existing. It's absolutely a fallacy. Fallacy. So it is important for us to stand that yes, it is these people that impose these ideas on us because they want what we have. And that we are engaged in a more of a narrative war, which is when we say that we do the optics cuck, when we say we're not a racist and all of these we're not a homophobe or anything like that, then we're basically saying that we refuse to engage in the narrative war. We are unwilling to engage in the narrative war, and I believe the power of the international finance capital, yada, 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 is exactly not in what they believe about us, but is what we believe about them. I don't think for a minute that they believe that they are God's chosen people. They know what depraved, scoundrels they are, as Martin Luther, he put it very eloquently, But they know that we actually believe that we are God's chosen people, and that there's something inherently good about us. So if they can convince us that it is actually them, then they have usurped it from us. If they have convinced us of all of these things, that South Africa is not actually our country, Ireland's not actually our country, we are not actually good, actually it is these people that, the noble savage that is good, then they conquer us through what we believe about them and what we believe about ourselves. Has got nothing to do with what they believe. They just want to convince us about who they are and who we are. So we must. There's perhaps this. I didn't get by telling it, but it's the story about the Anglo-Boer War, about a very famous. I wonder if it was a general, Edwin Conroy. I don't know if you ever heard of him, and he grasped this concept very, very firmly. He gave a Boer the order to execute the non-white. He said to him, shoot him. They caught him. He was a prisoner of war, and he said, execute him. And then after a couple of minutes, he hears no shots. He's like, what's going on? Why hasn't my comrade shot this thing? I say that not in a demeaning way. Anyway, so why hasn't he shot him? And he goes to see, and he inquires. He says, why haven't you shot him? And he's standing there and he's saying, sir, can't you hear how beautiful this colored man is praying? And then Edwin takes his sidearm and he shoots him in the head and he says, why do you listen to what he says?
Yes, that is ultimately it. And the idea that a lot of us are faced with politically, and this comes back to the realpolitik and what's pragmatic and whatever, is what can we have? What can we have is being put into our minds by other people. What we can have is whatever we demand. And as Pádraig Pearse actually said, and he was planning a military rebellion against British rule at the time, very consciously doing so, was he said that the Irish people deserved to be ruled by the English so long as they were ruled by the English. And the point he was making was that his other great phrase was, the English never commit a useless crime. But his point was that so there was the physical manhood within the country to expel British rule, that there had always been, that throughout British interference in Irish political life, as it began in 1189, onwards, through the Norman conquest and so on and so forth. That any influence that any foreigner exercised in Ireland was fundamentally, at the end of the day, exercised with the connivance of, or at least the acquiescence of, the majority of Irish people. Because faced with the Irish people as one, the Irish people, and this is what he said, if we stand at one, with gun in hand and sword drawn, we will get from England whatever freedom we ask England for. But if we leave down our gun and our sword and ask them for anything, we will get nothing at all.
Amazing.
Nothing at all.
Amazing. That is so well said. So I'm going to start taking questions. Not that I don't want to continue the conversation. I think maybe we should do this again in the future.
We can, yes, absolutely. I would love to do it.
Because I thoroughly enjoyed it, I must say. And I do think there's a lot still to discuss, both, teaching my people about Irish history, and perhaps, we can give you a couple of insights about South African history, who the good guys were, who the bad guys were. So I'm going to give you a couple of questions here from the audience. So R on YouTube asked, question to you, Justin. Is there any difference culturally between people from Ireland and Northern Ireland?
Right. That's actually two questions at the same time. Yes, is the answer. There is a cultural difference. There is no ethnic difference, but there is a cultural difference. And there is a cultural difference There's a cultural difference between the Southern Irish people who have lived under the calm of this semi-independence, and between us and the Northern Catholic nationalist population, which has lived under the direct boot of British rule for 100 years longer than we have. Because we don't understand the trials and tribulations and the exact nature of the horrors that they faced on a daily basis. We don't know what they had to go through. So there's a cultural difference between us and them. And then there is obviously the cultural difference between us and what is referred to as the unionist population. That is the people who favor the political union with Britain, or sometimes it's referred to as the loyalist population. Now, I don't know where they get loyal from, because the British aren't loyal to them anymore. They may have played that game at one point, and it may have seemed so, and it may have seemed that there was something outside of the island of Ireland that they could look to defend their separateness from the rest of the Irish people. But there is a cultural difference. But because there is not an ethnic difference, I would say none of these differences are insurmountable in the long run. But if those people believe, because they must adapt to our Gaelic way of doing things, because as Pádraig Pearse said, the Ireland we wish for is an Ireland that is not free merely, but Gaelic as well. Not Gaelic merely, but free as well. These people are capable of being Gaelic because the vast majority of them are Scots Gaels by heritage and ancestry anyway. But until they are if they are not willing to psychologically readjust themselves to the reality of Irish political unity, then they have to go. Then it's not even they have to go; they should want to go. If I felt British, I would want to live in Britain. If I thought I was British, I would want to live in Britain. It makes no sense to me that you would want to live in Tyrone or Fermanagh or Antrim or Down or Armagh or Derry and be British there. It makes no sense to me. But the people who are currently of a unionist mind frame, is nationalist Ireland open and welcome to the idea that they may physically remain, because they are so ethnically so similar, if there can be a cultural absorption, is the only way to describe it, because as an ethnic absorption, it's not difficult at all. It is not an absorption of any kind. As an ethnic matter, as a racial matter, it's not a question at all. But as a cultural matter and as a psychological matter, it's huge. It's huge. But they better prepare for the fact that it's huge for us too, and it's not just huge for them. And that the Irish government's talking on behalf of the Irish people, saying, "Oh, we will change the flag so that it makes the Unionists happier. Oh, we will change the national anthem because it makes the Unionists happier. Oh, we will change anything that makes them." No. You go up there and you tell them the Union is gone. Actually, the first thing you do is you pick up the phone and you tell the British that the Union is gone. And then you go up and you tell them in Northern Ireland that the Union is gone, and so they must be something else. And hey, free in Gaelic's not such a bad idea. It's not such a bad idea, and it's not so very far away from your actual heritage at all, except for this nonsense of the British monarchy and this nonsense of the Union flag and this nonsense, which was the whole concept of the British Empire was entirely not an English concept at all. It was an international finance object from the very get-go.
Absolutely.
The first intervention in Ireland by Norman forces was supported by Jewish money. The second most vicious attack upon the Irish people by Cromwell was financed by Jewish money, his expedition to Ireland. The great revolution, the glorious revolution, as they call it in England, of William of Orange coming and removing the Stuarts, was financed by Jewish money, because International Finance Capital wanted to move its headquarters from the Netherlands to England. And William of Orange chartered one of his first acts as the new king, with no bloodline relation to English monarchy, but very much a bloodline connection to Jewish money. William of Orange chartered the Bank of England, and the Bank of England has been the ones who have been money laundering for the British Empire ever since. And the collapse of the British Empire is nothing more and nothing less than the movement of the headquarters of international finance capital from London to Washington, or from London to Wall Street. That's all that happened here. There was no great change of power. There was never a time when the average Englishman, benefited from the oppression of the Irishman. There was never a time when the average Englishman benefited from the oppression of any of the peoples in the empire. The ordinary English person was always just as downtrodden as any of the people that he was supposed to be downtrodden, and that he is told in the historical narrative now, "Oh, you oppressed this people, you oppressed that people, you oppressed the other people." When they say that, if I was an Englishman, I would say exactly what should be done to the people who have oppressed the Irish this way. Exactly what should be done to the people who have oppressed the people of India this way. Exactly what should be done to the people who have oppressed the people of Kenya this way. And then we will tell you who it is.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, that is truly amazing.
And
I
we'll
like
tell
that.
you who it is. And you go and give it to them.
Yeah. That sounds fair. That sounds just and fair to me. Absolutely. Okay, so I'm going to bring somebody up. Good friend of mine, a man from America. He wants to ask you a question, if you don't mind. So I'm just going to add him to the stream quickly. Jeff, go ahead, buddy.
Hello, Jeff.
Hey, it's very nice to speak to you, Mr. Justin. How are you doing?
I'm doing just fine, and it's nice to speak to you too.
I've really, really, really enjoyed this episode, Johannes, and you two have a You've had a great back and forth, and I really liked your insights. I've never heard anybody break down the reasoning and, just a good dissection of what causes white infighting like you did about an hour ago, Mr. Barrett. That was actually absolutely perfectly said. And thank you for saying it.
Thank you.
Okay, so my question is, I texted it to Johannes. I want to read it like I texted him because I told him afterwards, I said, look at me speaking all fancy just after listening to this guy for 1 hour. But anyway, okay, so I said, please ask him to speculate on what's possible for America in terms of racial demographic recovery / the impossibility thereof.
The racial recovery of the white population in the United States is a matter of the will. That's it. That's it. That's all that's required. But you will not get it by following Trump. It's not coming from there. It never was coming from there. And I do understand why there might have been a moment in 2015 going into 2016 where it seemed like maybe, right? I get it. I get the attraction of the rhetoric. I get the charisma of the man. The way he behaves is, I get it. I get what draws people to him. But he's not going to deliver anything because, of course, he has chosen to be Jewish. He can't actually because the Orthodox Jews will never accept that somebody of the male line will ever be properly blood Jewish. But he has made himself actually Jewish, and he is the Jewish president of the United States. So the Jewish president of the United States will make Israel great again. He will. But MAGA, you can forget that. But the restoration of white dominance of the United States, or the creation of an ethno-state within totaling the entire United States, not giving up 1 inch of ground, not saying, we'll give Texas back to the Mexicans, and we'll give maybe California back to them, and we'll give the X part of the country to the Africans, and so on and so forth, is no, the answer to the 50 states. And again, you have Trump leading on with this nonsense about including Canada as the 51st state to start another stupid argument about nothing with the people that we should not be arguing with. But in any case, the restoration of an ethno-state that includes the territory of the 50 states of the current United States is a matter of the political will of the white people of America. And if they decide that they want it, and if they decide that they will support it to the extent that it will need to be supported, and if they will determine to remove the enemies that need to be removed in order to achieve it, then it can be done. And it can be done quite quickly. It can be done very quickly. There is an example, and most people aren't actually aware of this, there are many examples on the continent of Africa where various countries at various times have decided that, Kenya decided at one point, Nigeria decided at another point, is that they no longer wanted Africans from anywhere else on the continent in their country. And they got rid of them in 6 months. In Pakistan, they decided there were too many Afghans. They decided this. Nobody told us this in the Western media, by the way. It's not a secret. It's not a conspiracy theory. I mean, it's a published fact somewhere. And they'll always say to you, it was published in the Chicago Tribune. Look, it's there on page 7 under paragraph 9 somewhere. So we did tell you, but most people don't know it. Is the Pakistani government decided that there were too many Afghans living in Pakistan, and within 6 months they got rid of them. They're gone. There are a handful of Afghans left. The bulk of population, which was over 1.5 million, 2 million Afghans living in Pakistan, just gone. 6 months, gone. And they didn't even have, there was no particular military force required. They just removed their rights to remain, insisted that meant something, sent the army down for the purposes of ensuring that it happened, sent the police down for the insurance that it would be happened. And as soon as the Afghans within Pakistan realized that they were serious, is most of them voluntarily left. But here's the thing, is that happened between two brown peoples, as you like. So it's not headlines. And funnily enough, it's not racism either. When Pakistan throws all the Afghans out because it doesn't like Afghans, nobody goes, why don't you like Afghans? What's wrong with Afghans? What's wrong with Afghan culture? When Pakistan says there's nothing wrong with the Afghans in Afghanistan, there's nothing wrong with Afghan culture in Afghanistan, everybody goes, oh, fine, yeah, that's a fair point. But if you say that as American, okay, if Mexico is so damn great that you want to be Mexican in the United States, then go home. It's that simple. If you want large sections of the United States to be ceded to Mexico on the basis that they are now majority Hispanic, just go home and make Mexico. And get rid of your Jewish president of Mexico while you're at it, which is the most bizarre political fact of 2024, I have to say. And I'm living some bizarre things here, right? I'm living some bizarre things, and everybody in the Western world is living absolutely bizarre things, at least since about 2016 forward. We've all lived through bad times, but bizarre things that don't make any sense. But a Jewish president of Mexico has got to tip the hat. Really?
Is it more bizarre than the Jewish president that America currently has?
No, it's not, because they took a good long time to prepare people.
Yeah. I was only saying it in jest.
I know, but in general, yes, I suppose standing from a world historical perspective, no, it's not. It's not actually more bizarre. It is bizarre that this tiny group of people have this overwhelming amount of power, and that this power is based entirely on the willingness of the subjects to actually obey the authority in question. They do not have the physical manpower. They do not have the military manpower to enforce a single thing. They are not even able to destroy the terrorist organization Hamas in Gaza that they created. Now, if you can't destroy a terrorist organization that you yourself set up, then I'm afraid you're not very competent at dealing with your terrorist organizations.
There you go. So I mean, to the point that you made about America and optics, I like to say that, because there's this notion in South Africa that when Trump was president the first time around, the Afrikaner people are absolutely mad about Trump. They love him. You wouldn't believe it. You would think he's their savior. But in any way, so they said that, with the Ferguson riots, Trump couldn't, handle it in the appropriate way. He would lose too many votes. He can't say this or he can't say that. But people have to remember that political speech is indicative of political will. And if somebody will not say what they want to do, then it means that they don't want to do it. It doesn't mean that they can't say it. It just means that they don't have any desire to say it, because they don't have any desire to change anything. Now, with that, I have there's still so many questions that there needs to be answered or whatever, but I need to go get something for my throat seriously now, but I want to ask you this, though. what do you, because I've got a strong opinion about this, but I would love to hear your answer. And then you and Jeff could maybe converse for a little. I just want to state that we are now almost at 550 viewers. This stream is going exceptionally well.
I'm taking credit for that. I'm taking credit for the last one.
You've made an enormous contribution.
But Mr. Barrett, so
watching.
what do you think? What do you think about Trump's idea, whether it be real or not? What do you think about the annexation of Greenland, Mexico, and Canada? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Absurd. That's deliberately absurd. It's deliberately designed to because the president of the United States says it. It matters, right? It matters. I mean, if I said it, the people would just laugh out loud. If it had been said 10 years ago by Donald Trump, the businessman, he would have been laughed at. But anything the president of the United States says is serious by virtue of the fact that the president of the United States says it, including what Joe Biden crapping his pants in the Vatican. By virtue of the fact that it was the president of the United States that did it, it's important. Whether we like it be important or not is neither here nor there. And I would make a direct connection between the two. Is that Trump's idea of incorporating Greenland and Canada and Mexico into the United States is the political equivalent of crapping his pants in the Vatican. These are two events of which senile dementia gives Joe Biden the excuse. I wonder what Donald Trump has.
Oh, that's a great answer.
But what it seems to me is that it is the politics of distraction. But it is because it is Trump, and it is because it's his particular character, and because it's his particular way of behaving, is that he can get away with absurd distractions in a way that, historically speaking, even US presidents had to have some substance behind it. Trump has taken Richard Nixon's very logical, and we won't go into it now, but as a geopolitical strategy, the madman theory. He has taken it to its logical conclusion. Because when you hear Trump say, I'm going to take over Canada, and I'm going to take over Mexico, and I'm going to take over Greenland, you cannot actually sit in Canada, Mexico, or Greenland and go, he doesn't mean that. He just might. He just might, because he is that unpredictable. If it was required in order to further the agenda of the people who have hired him and placed him in office, then I can guarantee you it will happen, because it will make it happen on the Canadian border side too, and they will make it happen on the Mexican side, and they will make sure that the bill passes through the Danish parliament for the handing over of Greenland. But I would suggest that takeover plan is just, it's one of those things that, like, he woke up after having a dream. And you know the way when you have a nonsense idea after a dream, about 5 minutes later, it kind of fades away. With Trump, it stays with him all day. He does a press conference on it. And that's all that happened here. That's all that happened here. And it's just, and why is everybody, well, people have to pay attention because it's the president of the United States that is saying it. But what is it fundamentally about? It's distraction politics. It's absolute distraction politics.
Good answer. I do like that. So I think the last question that we're going to take from the audience, and then we're going to wrap up with final thoughts. Richie asks, was Justin taught by his parents? How does he and Rebecca get treated by people in his community? Is there any hostility? Also, does his kin agree or reject his position? Many of us face difficulties with families who have been propagandized beyond compatibility. So I would also like to answer that question, actually. So, but go ahead, Mr. Barrett. I'm quickly going to get
Um,
into drink.
I had adoptive parents, or an adopted child, so that's just as a matter of fact. No, none of my political ideology comes from them, or none of my political views find their origin in my in the generation before me, because biologically speaking, there wasn't one. Well, there is one, but you know what I mean. It's not one that formed part of my environment. So no to that question is no. It's taught to me by natural instinct and my self learning. How does he and Rebecca get treated by people in our community? Well, quite well. We get on fine with people, but we get on. I mean, you don't have to be political with people all the time. So, like when I go into the local town, or I'm talking to my neighbour and so forth, he knows what my politics are, or the people of Granard know what my politics are. It very rarely comes up outside of a general election, and even then, it comes up in or a referendum, and even then, it comes up in the context of, are you going to run? As a curiosity question. And it's just a friendly, neighbourly question. It never comes up as a political debate. I don't debate my neighbours, and I don't debate within my local community. I don't argue with people politics. I know they know where I stand. I've received no hostility that I can trace directly back. Any hostility I have received, I suppose, is the hostility that any person receives within any community. And was some of that on occasion politically motivated? I would guess possibly so. I would guess. It formed part of the motivation, but it was never part of the voiced motivation of anybody that I ever had any kind of antagonism with. And I have, in my private life, in my personal life, I have no enemies as such. The only enemies I have are the enemies of Ireland. And I can solidly say that. And I think Rebecca can say that too. As far as family is concerned, is again, it really is a matter of this for us, just for us, is we are so firmly grounded in what we believe in. And we are so firmly stated in what we believe in, and so public in what we have presented ourselves as, is that you would avoid social contact if you felt strongly enough in opposition to our views that you were willing to engage in hostility or in conflict. So it's a case of I'm not saying that everybody in her family, I'm not saying everybody in my family circles believes what we believe in, but anybody that we have continued to have contact with at least has accepted it to the point where it doesn't come up as a matter of conversation. And of course, there are many people we have actually in our family circle as well that we have managed to persuade to agree with, if not all of what we believe in, much of what we believe in, or most of what we believe in, and some people, indeed, all of what we believe in. So no, I'm not. I don't find myself on a daily basis in a personally hostile situation. But what I do have to be aware of when I step into the public arena as a political person, that I am bound to meet a political hostility. And that goes with the territory, goes with the job, I guess. That's fine. The extent to which it's personalized by certain people is astonishing. And the sense in which they're obsessed with myself and my failings, or not my imaginary failings, and Rebecca's failings and imaginary failings, and our private lives in general, of which they know absolutely nothing, by the way, because we keep ourselves to ourselves very the politics of it is hostile, yes, but the community of it isn't, and the family of it isn't. So
That's so great. But I can tell you this little thing. When I met my wife, so it was very quickly, she introduced me to her family after 3 days. I asked her to marry after 3 days. But then anyway,
hey, there's a
I
leap
am.
of faith.
I am such a guy, Mr. Barrett. I do take leaps of faith. I am a big risker, I only operate under high stress situations. So if I don't have stress, I am literally generally lackadaisical. But anyway, so they say to my wife, we'd like this Johannes guy, he's all right and everything, but we do think, and we're not saying this, but we do think he might be a little racist. The next time, the next time I visit them, I said, listen, I just want to clear the air on something. I heard you guys accusing me of being a little racist, and it doesn't sit well with me. And they said, oh, no, we don't want to offend you. I said, no, I am very offended. Every day of my life, I actively attempt to be the biggest racist in South Africa, and now you're telling me I'm a failure.
It is, yeah, that's the way to approach it. That is the way to approach it. When I met Rebecca, now I didn't ask her to marry me within 3 days. I can assure you, I'm far more prudential than that. But I don't know. I mean, because it's worked for you. So what works. I mean, you can't argue with success. But she said to me at one early point of conversation, she said to me, is are you perhaps a racist? And I said, oh, Rebecca, I am far more narrow-minded than that. I'm an activist.
That's amazing. I must say, one of my favorite clips that I saw about you. Sorry.
They're parallel stories, really, aren't they? I'm much worse. But it's widely accepted now on social media that she is worse than me. Because she will say something and somebody will come along and say she only says that because of her racist husband and her Nazi hater husband. And and somebody will follow up with, don't make excuses for her. She's worse than he is. And she takes great pleasure in that.
That's amazing.
We have we're in competition actually at the moment. I will grant you the most racist in South Africa because I'm not in that race, but it's within our own household. Who is the most racist person in Ireland? The left are not sure. They cannot make up their mind. They're pretty sure we're both pretty bad though. Pretty bad. And we're pretty happy about it.
Sounds like great company to me.
Yes, it does. It's a great point of agreement. Shared animosity can take you through many's a trial in life. Shared animosity.
Oh, that's amazing.
Else.
Could I ask a quick question about the white identity in general?
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to take up all your time or anything.
No, not at all. Not at all.
I think we have in America a very different view of, or maybe not view, but at least it means a lot. It means something a lot different to us than maybe the white people in Europe, what the white identity is. Do you think that it's a viable identity to unite around, or are the ethnic differences like in our actual blood just too much for us to overcome it and make, and rally around that white identity here in America?
Well, it depends on what you mean by rally around a white identity. Because if that means that, for example, Irish Americans must deny their Irish heritage, then yes, I would say that we're uniting around a white identity, which causes Irish Americans to deny their Irish heritage, would be asking too much from them. But I don't see the two things in conflict, and I've never seen the two things be in conflict. Because when I talk about nation as family, I feel that if the Irish people say, or my mother, father, sons and daughters, that the Americans, the South Africans, white people, the Canadian white people, the Australians, they are all first cousins, second cousins. They are relations of mine. And so I don't see a conflict between saying that I'm white and I'm Irish. But if you're going to ask me which I'm going to put first, then I'll be honest with you. I'm going to say I'm Irish first, but only because that's my instinct thing, the same as if you ask me what my last name is. I'm going to tell you what. If you ask me what my name is, I'm not going to tell you what my neighbor's name is. I'm going to tell you what my name is. If you ask me what word do I go under Irish. And of course, the Irish people are always number one to me. And within the context of Irish America, I would be surprised if the Irish Americans, within the context of the white identity, do not put their Irish American or their Italian American or their French American or their German American or their Swedish American, or for that matter, their original, waspish origins in England before their whiteness. But that doesn't need to be a conflictual situation, and was not a conflictual situation. Because each of the waves of immigration that came to the United States from Europe were absorbed and assimilated without necessarily changing the ethnic character of the peoples themselves. They became American, and they became part of what America was. It's outside of the white identity. What I would say, it's not possible to absorb and assimilate without destroying anymore. So there cannot be an Americanism that is not grounded in white Christian civilization. That doesn't make any sense to me. That doesn't seem real to me. That seems fake to me. Any kind of, and then within the white identity, I would expect people, whether I should or not is neither here nor there. This is just my point of view, is I would expect people to make a distinction based on their ethnic origin as to what kind of white they were. But I would not expect that distinction to lead to conflict, or that it should be a barrier to political cooperation in reasserting European descendant dominance of cultural and political life in North America. I don't see it that way. But what I would say is, outside of the white identity is a border, which is not an arbitrary line. It's dug deep. It's dug deep, and America cannot continue to be America. Can be what it was, or can ever be what it was again. This back to make America great again. Well, if it's to be great again, when was it great before? And what was great about it? And to a large extent, it was that it was homogeneously white. Even if it was mixed European, it was homogeneously white.
Yeah, well,
I
agree.
That's a little bit of a complicated answer, and I know it's not, straight up, but I don't think you can present, to me, I don't think there is enough substance in the statement, I am white, to give oneself a totality of identity.
See, that's why I asked you this, because it's something that I have been, ever since I got into racial politics in 2015, it's something that I have been asking myself and asking others. And as much as I've thought about it as long as I've thought about it, I've never really come to a good answer. But there is this very, very big problem in the identitarian, movement in America. And I think it is because there are so many people just like me who are just, I mean, for lack of a better word, a Euro mutt. Okay, I don't mean that in a bad way, but
Yeah,
like
no, I've heard the phrase.
yeah, I am 100% white, but the biggest percentage of any European ethnicity I have is like 32%, right? And so I
Yeah,
don't really identify with any of them other than Italian, which is I'm actually less Italian than I am Scottish, okay? But because my last name is Italian, people just, they say, "Oh, he's Italian." And I get it. My last name is very, very Italian. But I think there are a lot of people like me, especially in the South. There are a lot of people who are of very mixed European ancestry, and the only identity that we really do have is white. And but that identity was born from um, the contrast of the other people that the Jews keep shipping into America, right? So it's like we want an
yeah.
identity, but like the only one we have are the ones that they're giving us by shipping non-whites into our land. And so it's like, what identity should we strive for? How do we strive for it? So I think it's a great thing that you are Irish first, and Italians are Italian first in Europe. You should keep it that way, because I'm telling you, it's very difficult to get a solid identity racially whenever you are genetically mixed up between a lot of European ethnicities. It's one that's hard to make stick. So you're doing the exact
Well,
right thing.
If I
sorry, Johannes.
Sorry, Mr. Barrett, but if I can come into that point, we as Afrikaners, it actually makes us, even though we love the Dutch people, they're a great people, but if you're going to call me a Dutchman, you're going to make me angry, because I'm not a Dutchman, I'm an Afrikaner, and it's actually, the resentment is bred from when that is not acknowledged. When an Englishman comes to South Africa and says, "Oh, we're just white, we don't have to speak Afrikaans. Let's speak English because more people speak it." No. That's the quickest way that you are going to start, a conflict. Let's put it that way. So I do believe that the coming together of different European ethnicities has the absolute potential to birth new nations with new cultures, but the mixing of non-whites with European nature absolutely has the potential to destroy. So, as long as we remain white, we have the potential to create. But as soon as we add any kind of admixture other than white, we are destroyed completely. And it goes to the point that you made earlier, Justin, when you said that there are so many white immigrants in Ireland. Paul Creer already in 1882 said, although we accept immigrants from Europe and we encourage it, it must be done in a way that these immigrants are not brought to people that make them, to areas that are liberal and that would make them antagonistic to our cause as a nation, but that they assimilate and that they become Boer. Because even if they are immigrants, their children will be Boers. If I go to Ireland and I marry, let's say, for instance, your sister, then our children will be Irish, and that's just how it is. We are at
but having said that, there is this like overwhelming question then of numbers. Can you absorb a 22%? If the entire 22% were white, European, can you simply, and they've all arrived in the last 15, 20 years, can you absorb that and remain Irish and Gaelic? No, you can't. No, you can't. So in practical terms, but having said that, I've spoken to a lot of Eastern Europeans, people who have come here for work purposes, and they have no intention of staying. And some of them do. They have married, Irish men have married Eastern European women, and Eastern European men have married Irish women, and they have decided they are settling in Ireland. And in some cases, they have decided to go back to Eastern Europe. And all of that is fine as long as it's always on the fringes. It's a small scale turnover at the fringes. There's always an absorption on both sides and a complete assimilation on both sides. Where there cannot be assimilation because it is a blood poison is the only way to describe it, is interracial. Interethnic can be managed. It's a matter of numbers. But it has to be managed very carefully because it can get out of control very, very quickly, as we have found in this country. But any interethnic absorption that is required can be done if it is in small enough numbers over long enough time, and in fact could be regarded as a general positive in small enough numbers over a large enough length of time. But interracial, no, never, not once, not any. So if you ask me, how many black people are you okay with? How many Polish people are you okay with living in Ireland? I don't know, because I haven't sat down and counted what that means, and I would really have to be sitting in the government departments to work out the logistics of that. How many black people, though? I don't need a government department to tell me. None, not one, not a single one, nobody. Nothing.
Oh, that sounds awfully racist and awfully awesome.
How many cockroaches are?
One either.
How many cockroaches are you okay with in your kitchen?
Yeah, exactly. Well, not quite exactly. Maybe that's a bit. They're because cockroach. I don't think there's any nice place for cockroaches, but I do think there's an appropriate place for Africans. I do think there is. Just not my eye line. And as far as the American question is concerned, is that the intermixture of European descendants does not have to create Euro mutts. But I would when I think of American, I have a tendency, to draw the ethnic lines. But when I think of non-white Americans, I go, they aren't though. Right, that to me is your line of identity. It's not white identity. It's there are Americans, and they are of various ethnicities, and then there are black people who were brought over as slaves, and really as soon as they were freed, and that was the original plan, they should have been sent back. They should have been sent back immediately. And anybody who has invaded the United States, and that's the only way to describe it, has invaded the United States since, doesn't meet the constitutional requirements by the founding fathers of the United States in the Naturalization Acts, to be a white person of good character. That's the definition of American by the founders of the United States of America. And anybody who doesn't meet that definition is not an American. So that's the identity you unite around. So if you look at your DNA test and you see this amount of Italian and this amount of Scottish and this amount of Irish and this amount of Polish and whatever, there's no part of that can't be American. There's no part of that can't be American. But if you look at that and you find you find a little Ashkenazi in there, well, you've got yourself a problem. I'll be honest with you. You've got yourself a problem there.
Johannes has seen my DNA test. There's none of that in there.
Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about it. But I don't think that it can be presented as white identity. I don't think it will work in that way, because then why isn't Canada? Why aren't Canadians the 51st state? Is America not a thing in and of itself? Is it not something unique in its mixture of Europeans? And to somebody who says, oh, well, I'm a white identitarian first, I said, well, why are you accepting that black people are Americans? Why are you accepting that? If you think that, oh, you're not extreme enough for me, I'm a white identitarian. Well, you think black people are Americans. I don't. So I would suggest to you, all with all goodwill from across whatever thousands of miles of ocean, is that my definition of what qualifies as an American is far more exclusive than your average white identitarian. Because he's saying, oh, well, I'm a white American, and that's what makes me, that what gives me identity. And I would say, white American is a tautology. You've just said the same word twice. You're an American. That's all you said. That's all you've said to me there. Why are you, as a white identitarian, why are you accepting that black people are Americans? Why are you accepting Mexicans are Americans, mestizos are Americans? Why is part of the white nationalist movement accept Nick Fuentes as one of their leaders?
Mr. Barrett, I have to interject here. I cannot allow you to be disparaging towards Nick Fuentes because Jeff is a very big fan.
Dude, stop it. Don't tell that man. That's not true, Mr. Barrett. That's not true. That's 100%. Jack, tell him the truth. Christ.
It's not true. I'm joking, but because me and Jeff, from the very moment that I started it, we have been absolutely appalled by the character which is Nick Fuentes, because he's a little subversive. We can prove it or whatever. I can prove it at least, but it's exactly the people that would typically call their fatherland the monetary system or the international bank or whatever. These people, they need to stymie the growth of anti-Semitism or nationalism, if you will, people realizing that we are a people. And the only way to do that is by putting talking heads in here that misdirect our movement into something that will ultimately lead to yet the same conclusions that we have now. So no, we don't like Nick Fuentes. That was just a joke. Please
okay, that's fine. Because look, I'll roll with it. I haven't watched much of what he said, but I've watched enough to know that I don't like what he says.
Do you think that he prefers men or women, Mr. Barrett?
Is Nick Fuentes a faggot? Is that the question?
That's exactly the response I wanted to elicit.
I've never followed him into a bathroom stall, and I wouldn't. Is that an answer?
Yep.
That would suffice, Mr. I would say that is healthy prejudice, and that's the kind of prejudice that would save lives,
Yes.
His policy on making children is it's gay to have sex with a woman. So
yeah, well, yeah. He's part of a distraction. He's part of a distraction, and he's part of it's part of like splitting up this phenomenon that is otherwise coalescing, and the Jews know it's coalescing. This worldwide anti-Semitism is coalescing, and it's coalescing cross-ideologically as well, across the left and the right and all the rest of it, and they know it, they can feel it, but it will eventually coalesce around a singular ideology, and I believe the singular ideology it will eventually coalesce around is National Socialism. If I didn't believe that was the case, then I wouldn't be a National Socialist. People say, oh, well, isn't National Socialism German? If I thought it was just German, if I thought it was just for Germans or just relevant for Germans, then I would have no interest in it. But I believe it is if you want a white identitarian, or if you want an ideology that underpins the racial concept of a united people on the basis of race and how their lives should function within their nation states, then National Socialism provides you with that ideology. And therefore, I see it as a unifying thing. And I don't care if it's optically negative, because the people we're going to have to get past with a swastika flag and a picture of Adolf Hitler are the same people we're going to have to get past anyway. It's about time that people understood that. You have people like Keith Woods. Keith Woods is supposed to be Irish, and I believe, as far as I know, he actually is. Again, I wouldn't follow him into a bathroom stall. But
I'm happy to hear you say that, Mr. Barrett.
But I will say this. I was shocked to see that that he appears to have had some interest in this Monster Munch thing in the last while, which is called a woman. And he's tried to do. It's kind of the worst diverted scandal I've ever seen. He's like, you know, is this creature who may or may not be a woman somebody that you have been attracted to or have tried to have sexual relations with? And his answer is, I am not a Nazi. That's neat. I will give you, Keith, that is a unique answer.
Political speech is indicative of political will.
Is that woman, in fact, a woman? I am not a Nazi. Okay, right, we get that. Right, moving right along. Are you okay, Keith? You all right out there? You know? Yeah. You know,
that's refreshing, Mr. Barrett.
There's a coalition around there. There's a coalition growing, and it's like the reverse of the Big Bang Theory. It's like the whole constellation of events and things are coming together into one giant mass, which is a National Socialist counter-revolution to the Semitic empire of Judaism. And the best they have come up with thus far has been, which I would say is pretty poor and will ultimately fail, and gives me great confidence. But the best they have come up with thus far is legal restrictions, which ultimately have never kept down any idea ever in the long run. They've kept certain people out of certain movements at certain times, but they've never kept an idea down for any significant length of time. The other is to distract and to say it's literally the Jew saying, within the context of hating us, here's a different way to hate us. And that way, the whole thing does not come together in any kind of coherent form that actually forms a thread. So these are how clever and how manipulative these people are. Is if you tell them straight to their face that you hate them and that you will always hate them, and you will hate them for what they do, not for what they are. But what they are is what they do. Because that's what everybody is what you always do. Century after century after century is who you are. So we hate you for what you do, and the only people in the world who is the Jews, who would turn around and say, but you can only hate us this way. This is the accepted way of hating us.
That's so interesting that you put it that way. You know, we did some debates with Jews on TikTok in South Africa, and then we would call them out, and they usually say their answer. You know, when you say what you do is who you are. You know, they would answer the following way. We would say, so you know, your name is Bianca van Wyk. It sounds very, Boer. It sounds very Afrikaner. But tell us, why aren't you a Boer? Why aren't you African? What are you? What are you genetically? And the answer will be this. She says, I grew up in a traditionally English home. And there's the other guy. There's the other guy. We confronted him and we said, so what are you? Can you tell us, what are you? And he says to me, oh no, I speak German, because this is so fundamental to the ideas that they want to project onto white society, is that identity is nothing other than an idea. And that's why they push transgenderism. That's why they push faggotry in all its forms. It's because they do not think that they think that ideas give life to people and not that people give life to ideas. So yeah, that is very interesting, Mr. Barrett. We must understand who they are if we are to sufficiently, defeat them, and defeat them we must. I do want to point out that we have now gone over the 3 hour mark with 622 viewers of the stream live. At no point in time have we bled viewers. The numbers have been ever increasing, which means that people have thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I myself have enjoyed it so much. I do not want to stop the conversation, but I do think that, I have to, since I have other obligations as well.
Yes, there's a limitation on everything.
Exactly, but they say in Afrikaans, there's something we say, there's only two things that are with a tip before it that is good, and it's te vrede and te bad, which is it's basically the equivalent of too much of a good thing is a bad thing. But I don't think one can ever have too much anti-Semitism, right? But anyway, so I'm going to ask you guys for a last thoughts, Mr. Barrett, and then I'm gonna end us with the last idea, and then we must do this again. And if I'm ending the stream, perhaps you could just stay for 5 minutes. I just want to say goodbye off air and stuff like that. So, Mr. Barrett, would you go?
Before he gets into that genius closing statement, which is going to be way better than what I want to say, I just want to say one last thing to you, Mr. Barrett, that I just want to do a little shameless kissing ass to you on an ethnic level. I did name my youngest son Clann, which is a very Irish name. I just want to throw that out there to you. It was very nice talking to you, and I hope you have a great day and the rest of your week.
Jeff, it was really nice meeting you. Really nice. And hopefully we'll meet in real life too at some point.
Hope so.
Yeah. Have I anything deeply profound to say as an end call? I generally speaking don't, because I'm more used to hostile interviews. So I'm used to making sure I get what I get. I front load what I say, right? And I've only mastered the habit of these long answers since I've been doing receptive podcasts or receptive Twitter spaces or whatever. And that's really in the last couple of years max. So I do it always comes to this point, and I'm expected to say something deeply profound as an end statement, and I don't have one because I've made sure in the last 3 hours to say whatever it was that I thought needed to be said. Now, in a minute we close off, of course, I'll think of something. But I suppose we better sloganize the end, which is that we just have to carry on, no matter how difficult the task seems to be at any given time, either in our own personal lives or within our own national lives. We just have to carry on. And ultimately, we are not responsible, or this is what I feel, is we are not responsible for the outcome. We are responsible for the part we play in the outcome. And
now, if that is not profound, I don't know what profound is.
Well, okay, we'll leave it on that then, since if I've hit on it by accident.
Where can people find you, Mr. Barrett, for the audience?
I should make out a list of my I'm on Telegram. I'm on like Twitter on my own name, so I should be easy enough to find. But I should come on with a list of prearranged things for people to scan through. I would say to people, just look up my name, and you'll find the contact details. And the next time I'm on a broadcast like this, I'll be a little bit more prepared with the exact contact details, so that people can get in touch and stay in touch, because I love to be able to talk to and with new people, and get new perspectives, and maybe perhaps be of some use in sharing my perspectives with people, either on a personal level or on a broadcast level like this. So I would leave it at that, Johannes, and I would say thank you very much for having me on, and I wish you, in your relatively desperate situation in South Africa, I use South Africa as an example of where we will end up very quickly if we don't do something now. We have the majority situation now in this country, so we have the simple solution. Your solution is going to be a more difficult path, and our solution, if we get to where you are, is going to be much more difficult. So I would say I wish you the very best, as I said, in the desperate situation you're in, but at the end of the day, we're all in the same. We're all in the same boat, which is we are trying to defend our nations and our identities and our families and our children and their futures from predatory finance capitalism, predatory pedophilism, predatory internationalism, predatory Marxism, and the whole goddamn thing is Jewish.
That is amazing, sir. I must say it was an absolute honor to speak with you. I have said this, and it might sound vain, but it is not often that I speak with a man that I feel that I learned something from in the political sense, but I feel like I have learned a lot tonight speaking with you, and it was a great honor. And, I do hope to have you back on again in the future, we as a movement. And in closing, I would say to the audience, what Justin said is so true. I always say the same thing to our people. It is within the collective of our people lies the answer. We must just remain committed to do our part in searching for that. We must remain consistent. So freedom for the white man, America for the white man, Ireland for the white man, Europe for the white man, South Africa for the white man. Cheers, everybody. We will see you again.
Thank you and good night.